called if we need vaccines where they are not currently available, especially for the developing young and big countries. The production of vaccines is not much, and also the issues of people, whereby a lot of countries try to ensure that vaccines are distributed there instead of being distributed globally. All these issues will be discussed during our satellite session. And therefore, in this particular session, we shall deal with discussions around the COVID-19 vaccinations. We shall hear from the experts regarding their efficacy and effectiveness, but also the behavioral strategies that may be utilized to minimize the misinformation and perhaps at the end of the day increase vaccination time. We are aware that at this era of unprecedented information flow, we have a lot of information that is circulating around that may not be, and it influences one way or another what people believe in. Without wasting a lot of your time, I am the moderator of this session. My name is Dr. Efficacy from the Department of Technology here at MUHAS. And we are privileged today to have 5 discussants. Professor Eligius Yamuya, Professor Karen Martin, Dr. Erasto Kazovia, Professor Resha Bari, and Dr. Siraji Sad, who will be joining us via online from Namibia. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite the first discussant. And before I do that, I have to introduce you.
Namsikia kwa mbali. Niko mbali na ile kompyuta ya kutetea wewe kwa ya. Sisi ina mic kutoka nini hizo. Kwa sababu ukiwa mbali.
Professor Eligius Yamuya.
Sogea hapo kwenye podium hapo.
Professor Eligius Yamuya holds an MD and MA degree from the University of Dar es Salaam and the PhD holder from the Confernce Institute. He is a professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Health and Health Sciences, where he served in various academic and administrative positions. The latest being the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Academic Research and Consultancy. Professor Yamuya is a fellow of the Tanzania Academy of Sciences. He is also a fellow of the College of Pathologists of East Central and Southern Africa. His research interests include HIV and other sexual infections, immunology of infectious diseases, molecular immunology of bacterial pathogens, and microbial chemotherapy and promotion of research ethics. He also served as PI on various research projects that include the transforming PI or PI in various projects, including the European and developing countries clinical trial strategy, EDCTP, the multi-center HIV vaccine trial in Tanzania and Mozambique. He is also a co-PI on the project transforming health professional education in Tanzania, and also co-PI for the Center of Innovations in terms of care technology. Professor Yamuya has over 120 scientific publications. Professor Yamuya, may I now invite you to share with us your thoughts, to picking up the discussion, and maybe you will tell us about the overview of COVID-19 vaccine. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Kiongozi Gideon Kwesikiabo, participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'll be taking you through an overview of COVID-19 vaccines and that is how I will conduct the discussion. One, I will start with a brief background information, which already has been largely covered by the chair. Then I will point out some key structures of SARS-CoV virus type 2, which are relevant to vaccine development. I will then briefly point out the main components of a vaccine, the way vaccines are developed, and the way COVID-19 vaccines have been developed so far. But I will also mention the reasons why it has been possible to develop COVID-19 vaccines rapidly, because this is an issue that people have wanted to know. Then I will talk about challenges in COVID-19 vaccines development. So, ladies and gentlemen, the way of background information, which has already been mentioned, we know that this is a problem that occurred late in 2019, and then WHO took up the leadership by declaring it a public health emergency of international concern because it was kind of unique. It had the potential to spread in various states through international travel, and obviously it required coordinated international action for control and prevention. It was then named SARS-CoV-2, while initially it was COVID-19 disease, and then later in March, it was declared as a pandemic, a disease that has a potential of spreading in many countries in the world. As of yesterday, the global figures are shown there. Cases 192.3 billion and it is million cases. And then out of those, 4.1 million deaths. In Tanzania, the officially reported data is shown there. I don't want to even mention it. Suffice to say that we have more recent information regarding the magnitude of the problem in the country, and these are being announced by respective officials day by day. But anecdotal evidence indicates very, very clearly that since the beginning of the outbreak, there have been cases in this country, and 3 phases of the outbreak can be identified. The first one that occurred in 2020, and then the second one late 2020, and then early this year. And now we have the third one, which appears to have raised the attention of majority of the people. The structure of SARS-CoV-2 virus is as shown schematically there. It is an enveloped coronavirus, enveloped like HIV, and then it has what we call structural proteins, some of which are anchored in the envelope and some in the nucleocapsid. As the spike protein is of great relevance in vaccinology, as you will hear later. And then the membrane protein is largely embedded in the membrane, as well as the envelope protein, which is also largely in the envelope, but part of it protrudes outside the envelope. We have a nucleocapsid protein, which serves to anchor the RNA, which is the genome of this virus. And the RNA is of a single stranded nature, positive sense. Positive sense meaning that this RNA can serve as a messenger RNA, and therefore can be used to translate the viral components. Now, when you hear of a vaccine, It is a substance of a biological nature, and it has two major components: the vaccine antigen and then the ingredients. The vaccine antigen can actually be a killed organism, what we call inactivated organism. It can be a weakened or attenuated type of the microorganism, but you can also use small components of the microorganism like proteins as vaccine antigens. And now recently, technology has advanced very much. We can now produce nucleic acid antigens, either DNA or RNA. The vaccine also has ingredients like preservatives, which prevent microbial contamination of the vaccine, especially when it is open. We have stabilizers, which prevent any chemical reaction from taking place amongst the components. We have surfactants which keep the components combined together, they are blended together. And then an adjuvant is a substance that can actually enhance the immune response against the antigen. So these are the vaccine components. And when you hear of vaccine development, they center around identifying the relevant antigen and then adding those ingredients, you come up with a vaccine. In developing a vaccine, there are several stages that one has to go through. One is exploratory stage that is highly scientifically demanding because you need to use basic science, sometimes computational modeling, in order to be able to identify the relevant portion of the microorganism that can evoke an immune response that is of a protective nature. So this requires a lot of scientific processing, including epitope marking, etc. But the end result is to identify the antigen, which is the target for immune response. Once you have identified the target, then you have to take it through what we call preclinical stage. Preclinical meaning that before you move it forward to human populations. And in preclinical stage, among other things, you have to try to study the behavior of the antigen in experimental animals in order to see whether it is safe and also whether it is able to produce relevant immune responses that are protective. Preclinical stage is also very demanding. For one thing, some of the experimental animals that are required are very expensive to procure and maintain. Like monkeys, don't think that it is very easy to get monkeys. It is one thing to get monkeys, but to keep them and maintain them is also a major challenge. Then after the vaccine has gone through preclinical stage successfully, it can then be moved for trials in human population, what we call a clinical development phase. And you have phases in clinical trials to try to see the safety and the efficacy, safety and immunogenicity of the vaccine in phase 1 and in phase 2. But also in phase 1, you can try to determine the dose that is appropriate. In phase 2, apart from safety and immunogenicity, you also look at the behavior of the vaccine in different age groups, okay? And whether it will produce protection of a kind. In phase 3, that is where the efficacy of a vaccine is determined. I think this will be discussed later, and I don't want to preempt the presenter. After it has gone through the clinical phase, it has to be approved by regulatory authorities. By regulatory authorities after review. An example of regulatory authority in this country is TMDA, or Tanzania Medicines and Medical Supplies and Devices Authority. In countries like the USA, the the regulatory authority is the American Food and Drug Administration. You also have regulatory authorities in Europe, in many countries in the world. Suffice to say that the regulatory authorities review all the data, right from the preclinical phase up to the clinical phase. They look at all relevant issues, and once they are satisfied, they approve the vaccine for use. But then before use, it has to be manufactured. And this is an area also of a lot of challenges. Having good manufacturing practice applied fully and followed rigorously to ensure that the product is safe and has the qualities that are required. And finally, quality control, which is absolutely important throughout the whole process of developing a vaccine, because without good quality, you cannot assure of safety and even the capacity to evoke an immune response. Then after looking at the stages, what are the kind of types of vaccines that we know? I'm sure most of us are very well aware of the three major types: whole microbe vaccine, subunit vaccine, and the nucleic acid vaccine. But for the whole microbe vaccine, there are three different types. Either you use the killed organism as your vaccine antigen, or you weaken it so that it cannot cause disease, but it can still stimulate immune response. Or you can use a virus vector, which is a harmless virus, but carries the genetic message for production of the antigen by the host who is inoculated. For subunit vaccine, as I've mentioned previously, you just use a component of the microorganism, oftentimes a protein, that is capable of challenging the immune system to produce protective responses. Nucleic acid vaccines, I will describe later. This is kind of advanced development. I recall during our time when we were in medical school, this was just a very theoretical thing, and you just mentioned it for completeness. You had nothing to say about it anymore. But then later, we started seeing some nucleic acid vaccines around, and currently, some of those have been able to be moved to use in human beings. This summarizes the approaches that were taken to develop the various COVID-19 vaccines that I will mention, including the whole microbe approach, where live attenuated, whole inactivated, and viral vectors have been explored. I want to mention at this point that we do not have a live attenuated vaccine yet for COVID-19. Those which have been developed are still at various phases of investigation. But we do have an RNA vaccine, and we also have a subunit vaccine amongst the candidates for COVID-19 vaccines. The attenuated platform of vaccine development enjoys the advantage that you use a weakened virus, and therefore it can strongly evoke immune response that involves the B and T cells. And you know the consequences will be being able to produce strong humoral as well as cell-mediated immune response. A technology is well established for attenuating viruses, usually by serial passage in cell lines. It is also reckoned that it is simple to manufacture them. However, because they are live attenuated, they may revert to virulence and cause disease. And because of that potential complication, we have to be very careful with immunizing immunocompromised individuals. This type of vaccine is not suitable for that. Another caveat is that they also require a very well-functioning cold chain in order to maintain viability of the organism. If you don't make sure that you strongly maintain the cold chain, the vaccine will not be live and will die along the way and will no longer be effective. As I already mentioned, there is none for COVID-19 that has been approved yet. For inactivated vaccine development platform, this is very well established. Viruses whose genetic material has been destroyed are used. They will not be able to replicate. They also will not have some of the virulent properties, but they can still trigger immune response, but because the various morphological components of the organism are still in place. We have well-established technology in the world. They are relatively simple to manufacture and suitable for people whose immune system is compromised because they don't replicate and they cannot cause disease. And again, the advantage of this type of vaccine is that no cold chain stringency is required. However, you may need booster doses. Oftentimes they are required in order to ensure that you maintain adequate immunological levels in the vaccinated individuals. For the viral vector vaccine, as I said, you use a modified virus, the so-called vector. This is not capable of causing disease, but is capable of multiplying. And what you do is through recombinant DNA technology, you identify your gene of interest, the gene that encodes for the message of expressing a certain protein that is antigenic. And then you insert it in a plasmid, and then you transfect the virus with the plasmid that carries the gene of interest. And then when this vaccine is injected in human host, the virus multiplies, and during the multiplication process, the genetic information of the foreign gene is expressed in the host as your vaccine antigen. So the antigen that are produced trigger immune response. There is a well-established technology for this kind of vaccine. They evoke a very strong immune response that involves both humoral and cell-mediated arms. But the disadvantages include the fact that previous exposure to the vector can actually reduce effectiveness of the vaccine. And I will give you a very small example. With the HIV vaccine trial, there was a trial that was conducted in the United States, referred to as the STEP trial. Another one was conducted in South Africa, the Pambili trial. It was the same trial, America being one side and South Africa another side. They used adenovirus vector for the vaccine concept. What happened is that during interim analysis, some of the vaccinated individuals who received the test vaccine actually developed a breakthrough HIV infection. And according to ethics requirements, the vaccine trial was stopped. This was a negative impact in the HIV vaccine trial initiatives, and people were very much disappointed. When the matter was investigated, one of the findings was that amongst those who developed the breakthrough infection, a significant proportion had high levels of antibodies to adenovirus. These were preformed antibodies because these were people who were previously infected with adenovirus. In settings like ours, adenovirus infection is very common amongst the population. So one has to be very careful in using such a vector. But I know that after the STEP trial and the Pambili trial, the technology has been innovated adequately, and even the adenovirus vector that is used now is quite okay. It doesn't appear to cause a problem. But another disadvantage is that the vector vaccines are complex to manufacture. The examples of COVID-19 vector vaccines include AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Sputnik vaccine that have been developed and have been recommended for use. For subunit vaccine, that is a vaccine based on a protein fragment of the virus, these have been developed and tried. The advantages include the fact that they are suitable even for people whose immune system is compromised because there are no live components and no risk to reversion to virulence. They are also very relatively stable without requiring a stringent cold storage chain. Now, disadvantages include that they are relatively complex to manufacture. I can tell you that identifying the relevant antigen in a protein molecule is not an easy matter. And therefore, identifying which protein will be suitable for evoking an immune response is not a simple matter. It requires a lot of time in the exploration phase. And that is why it is said that they are complex to manufacture. And also this vaccine concept requires addition of adjuvant in order to enhance its immunogenicity, as well as requiring a repeated vaccination in order to make sure that we maintain a high level of protective immunity. An example of COVID-19 vaccine in this platform is Novavax. And then finally, the nucleic acid vaccine concept. This uses the genetic material, DNA or RNA from a virus. It is a segment that encodes for a particular antigen is identified. And then once this genetic material is injected in the host, it directs the host cells to express the encoded protein. And antigens are produced that then trigger immune response. The advantages include the fact that the immune response is both humoral and cell-mediated. And since there are no live components, there is no risk of triggering disease. They are relatively easy to manufacture. That is what we are told. But the disadvantages include the fact that some RNA vaccines require ultra cold storage facilities. For example, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine requires a temperature up to -80 freezer. -80 freezer is a scientific freezer, and you don't find it in most of our facilities. You won't find it in maybe research institutions, and also in the in Tanzania in the extended program on immunization, because they store some of these vaccines that require such low temperatures. So that is a problem. And definitely when imagining of scaling up vaccination up to hard-to-reach areas, this becomes a bottleneck. In addition to that, booster shots may be required. Now, COVID-19 nucleic vaccines include the Pfizer BioNTech and the Moderna vaccines, which are based on messenger RNA. Now, up to March 2021, 232 candidate COVID-19 vaccines have been developed in the world. And 172 in preclinical development and 60 in clinical development. 9 out of these 60 are already approved under the so-called emergency use authorization, a concept that applies to countries like the USA, Europe, but also many other countries, whereby the regulatory authorities have made a fast approval of these products in order to deal with an emergency situation in the world that is affecting many people and killing a significant part of the population. Also, up to yesterday, 3.65 billion doses of vaccines had been given, And 1.07 billion of these vaccines were in fully vaccinated individuals, and 1.07 covers 13.9% of the global population of 7.9 billion people. So the world is very much below the vaccination, what you may say, vaccination threshold. Vaccines approved in the USA are 3, the Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and Janssen. Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna, these are messenger RNA. They require very cold storage facilities. Countries like the US can afford to have these because they will have those facilities. In Tanzania, the vaccines that have been recommended in the national guidelines include the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna, simply because these have already undergone rigorous evaluations and found to be very safe and very effective. But then to have these roll out in the country, you would need cold storage facilities. Novavax, Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, these are quite okay in terms of the fact that they don't require the stringent cold storage requirements. And you are all aware that we have recently received a consignment of Johnson & Johnson vaccine in the country. Now, this is a table that tries to indicate the vaccines, the vaccines that have already been authorized under emergency use, and there are several more candidate vaccines. As I've mentioned, they are not tabulated here. But what I want to say is that if we go to the sources for vaccine development on the internet, you'll find this information. Why has it been possible to develop COVID-19 vaccines so fast? One very important factor that has contributed to this is the fact that, remember, we had severe acute respiratory syndrome epidemic that occurred in the past. We had the Middle East respiratory syndrome that also occurred. All these are due to coronaviruses of the same genus as that of COVID-19 virus. A lot of work was put in place during those previous outbreaks to try to develop vaccines. So already there was a pre-existing data, especially on the initial phases of vaccine development. So developing COVID-19 vaccines just took advantage of this and propelled. Okay, so the exploratory phase was actually omitted all through. But then we have advances in medical technology that have occurred in the last decades, and that have led to the potential to innovate vaccines rapidly. As I said, for example, development of nucleic acid vaccines was very much unknown in the past. We were taught this in medical school as potential theoretical approaches, but there was no efforts. At that time, there was no technology for producing them. And then later, I remember when I was doing my postgraduate training, I read information about experiments on nucleic acid vaccines. As soon as I completed my postgraduate training and went to PhD training, a lot of information already available about nucleic acid vaccine development. And in 2007, when we started the HIV vaccine trials at Muhimbili, at MUHAS, we started a trial using a candidate that was based on DNA, okay? So we have experience with the DNA HIV vaccine candidate in our setting. And then later, people perfected technology, and now it is possible to manufacture messenger RNA vaccines. People also made sure that in order to respond to the epidemic, they overlapped some of the clinical phases of the trial. A phase 1 would be happening here, and a phase 2 of the same product would be happening like that, in order to reduce the time horizon. The regulatory authorities also reduced the stringency of, of authorizing candidate vaccines, and promoted what is called emergency use authorization, where vaccines that have been reviewed and found to be quite safe and efficacious can roll out for use even before completing the rigorous regulatory approval process. And then rapid manufacturing has also been a factor. Because of technology, again, even the industry for producing vaccines has developed very fast, and they can manufacture vaccines very quickly. If you compare the traditional way of developing vaccines and the way COVID vaccines have been developed, unfortunately, this is not very, very clear. But let me say that preclinical studies in the traditional vaccine development approaches would take 18 to 30 months, but in the expedited process for COVID-19 vaccine development, this is narrowed to 2 months. In the clinical phases 1, 2, and 3, in the traditional way, it would be around 30 months, but now it has been reduced to 6 months. And then in phase 4 or post-marketing phase, in the traditional way, 12 to 24 months, but with the expedited process in COVID vaccine development, it's 4 months. Altogether, in the traditional vaccine development pathway, it would take 10 to 15 years to come out with a product that is okay, and that can be used. Whereas in the COVID-19 vaccine initial development process, this has been shortened to 12 to 16 months. So those are the reasons why it has been possible to develop COVID-19 vaccines very fast. What about COVID-19 vaccine development challenges? One of them is ethical issues. When you combine the clinical phases, it also leads to problems because oftentimes you'll be dealing with only small populations, and therefore you may not be able to determine the efficacy that is fair enough for protecting populations. Fast tracking also has the potential of leading to ineffective vaccines because of the rapid process of doing things, and you may omit some important issues. Then there are questions regarding the ethics associated with the fair allocation of vaccines. I can tell you this. Vaccines arrived in the country recently. The ongoing debate amongst many people is who are going to access that vaccine. Even though the National Committee gave a priority list of who should be given priority in the vaccination, but already people are hesitating that they may not be reached by the vaccine, and concerns have been raised. So that is an ethical challenge. We have the issue of vaccine efficacy. How much efficacy do you have to achieve in order to say that this is okay? It's $1 million question, but people are saying that when it is 70% and more, then that is fair. But you may also have an efficacy which is lower than that threshold, which may still prevent some deaths and hospitalizations. So what about this? Efficacy in elderly individuals and children is also a bottleneck because the clinical trials are designed such that the participants are young adults oftentimes. So these two extremes of populations are not covered in the clinical trials, and therefore you have a challenge with determining what efficacy would be relevant to these age categories. Problem of manufacturing and distribution. If we have read about the issue of vaccines, the major problem that is now being discussed is the inadequacy of the vaccines that are produced to be able to reach needing populations in the world. The manufacturing companies are not capable for the time being to handle that requirement. So a manufacturing capacity is needed, and it is a major challenge. In this country, there has been a proclamation that we would need to go into manufacturing, and partly it is because of the need to address this kind of challenge among other reasons. Distribution is also a problem, and this is where fair allocation of the vaccine may also be a challenge if we don't have equitable distribution of the vaccines. And finally is vaccine hesitancy. The so-called anti-vaxxers. Anti-vaxxers are individuals who are against vaccines, and they will try day and night to manufacture myths surrounding the vaccine, paint it in a very negative way so that people do not go for it. So this community poses a threat to COVID vaccine development and use in needed populations. I think it will be described more by the discussant on myths and facts. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are several references of interest that can be very resourceful, but let me say that in the United Republic of Tanzania, our country, our motherland, we have COVID as a problem. No need to deny anymore. Fortunately, we have workable interventions that have been promoted and that have been proven to be very useful, including hand washing with running water and soap, complemented with sanitization, the use of masks, maintaining social distancing, and civilized way of coughing and sneezing, and also making sure that the premises where we live in, where we work in our offices, are very well ventilated. With now the option of vaccine. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for listening. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Anuya, for giving us an overview of COVID-19 vaccines. Next, we shall now hear from Professor Karim Manji. And before he shares his thoughts with us regarding the current evidence of COVID-19 vaccines, efficacy and effectiveness, may I introduce Professor Karim Manji to you. Professor Karim Manji is a professor of pediatrics and child health and has been a faculty here at MUHAS since the 90s. He has held various administrative positions that include Dean School of Medicine and Executive Registrar at the University of Veterinary Sciences, I guess, by the time he was the Professor Karim Manji is a member of various academic professional organizations that issues local and international. He is a fellow of the Tanzania Academy of Sciences, a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, and a fellow of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. He received the National Institute for Medical Research Best Health Research Scientist in Tanzania, the 2016 award, and the International Excellence in Patient Care Award, RCT London in May 2019. His research interests include immunology medicine, nutrition, infectious diseases, and the developmental aspects in children, including autism. Professor Kanimanji has presented numerous survey lectures in 175 occupations in care with women. With that brief introduction, may I now call upon Professor Kanimanji to share with us his thoughts regarding COVID-19 vaccines efficacy. What's the title?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kwesigabu, for that very kind and glossy introduction. Respected seniors, respected viongozi, the Vice Chancellor, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the directors and others, all protocols observed. Good afternoon to all of you. I hope I'm audible, right? Yeah, so as you can see from what Professor Kwesigabu introduced, there isn't anything about infectious disease and vaccinology there. So when I was offered this topic by my colleague, Dr. Kija, I said this is a great challenge and I will take it. I'll do it. Having been like a worm, yani funza anakula majani. I have that kind of OCD that I actually eat away the publications till it gets dissolved in my brain. So I said I will do this. So some of this discussion will be overlapping with what Professor Liamwea has already said. But at the outset, because it is a vaccine thing, and vaccine thing globally means money, I want to declare no conflict of interest. I have not been influenced by anybody, by any company, by any other sources. This is purely an academic issue I'm presenting. And I would like to acknowledge the help of the people mentioned there. And as you know, with the vaccine, this is not like the research I did on zinc and diarrhea or azithromycin and diarrhea and low birth weight infant feeding things. It is my own research and I am an authority. So as I said in the earlier slide, most of these are derived from sources which have been acknowledged. So I'm declaring that because I'm wanting to tell you that there should be no plagiarism. You have to acknowledge the source. In this slide, you have already heard a lot about when it began and all these things. I only want to highlight two things here. Number one is, as of now, it's easy to remember, 200 million, 4 million, 200 by 4. 200 million by 4. That means 200 divided by 4. That means for every 50 people who are infected, 1 person died. Or for every 100 people who are infected, 2 people died. So the mortality is very high. 200 million infected globally, 190 something, a little underreporting, so safe to say 200, and 4 million people died. 200 by 4, it's very high. It is amongst the highest of all the epidemics which has caused so many deaths globally. And the last line in this one is, despite all the measures in many countries, the positive cases are increasing and deaths are also increasing on a daily basis. Despite vaccination, all those social distancing, blah, blah. This is compounded by the mutation of the variants of concern. And I will touch a little bit on that one. So the key message is, because of the continuous changing variant and the advancement in science and the clinical spectrum, it is very important to be up to date. And the only way to prevent this COVID pandemic is to get vaccinated. The longer the virus stays in the community, the more higher chances it will mutate. So when we said measles coverage was above 80%. We don't see measles nowadays the way we used to see when we were interns and residents. Prof, you agree there at Makuti at infectious disease, we used to be called at night to certify 5 deaths of children with measles every day. full-blown measles with complications, nematoceles, diarrhea, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, if I'm going to see a measles case, I will have to rush and tell all my residents to come and see this is how measles looks, because it has become rare. But because of the vaccine, 80% of the population is vaccinated with measles. We don't find measles. And there is something which I might come again called breakthrough infection. And this is very important because the anti-vaxxers, they said, "Huyu amechanja na amepata corona." It's fine. It is possible. They are called the breakthrough infections. The breakthrough infections happen in a few percentage of people, either because of the vaccine itself or the individual immune response. We have breakthrough infections in measles, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that the vaccine did not work. By far and large, it has worked. So, you heard about this, the whole structure, but there is something here which we will talk about in the safety and efficacy issue. And you heard this from Prof, so I will not dwell on this one. But there is one thing, the different types of vaccine, you can draw actually your RNA, DNA, protein subunit going this way until the inactivated or attenuated virus. These are how these vaccines are. And you find that Sinovac is the attenuated virus. And the viral vector is Gamaleya or the Sputnik, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson. And then the protein subunits, you have the Novavax. And then the RNA, you have the Pfizer Biotech and Moderna. You know this chain of infection. You need an exit and you need a recipient. That is why we break the chain by using the mask. Now, little bit about transmission of COVID-19 infection. You need an exit, you need a mode of transmission such as coughing or sneezing, and you need a portal of entry to the susceptible host. So coughing, sneezing, even speaking closely, sitting very close, or holding into tables and doorknobs and handrails. You know, as the science evolved, when we first started hearing about COVID-19 in March last year, oh, we were paranoid. Paranoid, it says you hold the doorstep, you first sanitize. It says it can stay for more than 24 hours. Yes, but we have seen that there is a little laxity there because science has said, yes, you have to sanitize, but you don't have to be paranoid. Okay. Now, when you are talking about touching eyes and nose, this is very important because the eyes and nose, especially the eyes, and I can see an ophthalmologist sitting here and looking at me, the angiotensin converting enzyme receptors are highest in the eyes, particularly the bulbar conjunctiva. That is why probably wearing goggles is protective from the droplets. That is why you are told usifikishe macho baada ya kufikisha pua au kumshika mtu mkono. That's why eyes, and therefore this variant, the double variant, is very much transmissible through the eyes because of a high level of S inhibitors and its affinity with the fusion virus protein to hold on to the knob and transmit even further. So that's why we are talking about this. And we know the signs and symptoms. There are some emerging signs and symptoms, some little changes here and there, but by far and large, we know these signs and symptoms. I won't dwell much on this. And we know symptoms begin gradually, infectivity, 5% become critically unwell, and mortality depends on age and comorbidities and so forth. And we know the complications from COVID, as we have already heard many times from various sources, from classes, from journals: venous thromboembolism, heart, liver, kidney problems, neurological problems, Guillain-Barré syndrome, demyelinating syndromes, coagulation problems, respiratory failure, and multi-organ failure and septic shock. we know these are the complications of the disease. That's why I'm saying this because we will see the complications of the vaccine. One thing I want to make it very clear, that out of all the deaths related to and proven due to an underlying COVID infection, all the deaths, 99% of those deaths, 99 point something, were related to those who are not vaccinated. That means if you are vaccinated, the chances of death is very low. So, likewise, for those who received the vaccine, you just opposite corollary, that there were very few mortalities. So you take mortality, vaccinated or not, you take vaccinated mortality or not, and what ways it proved that it was the vaccine which did the job. In pregnancy, we have seen a few increased incidences of admission of the neonates just because the mother was very sick. It's not, fortunately, the neonate is relatively spared from the complicated ones, although there are increased incidence of admissions. And recently I was talking with the African Neonatal Network to ask if they have increased incidence of pericardial effusion in the neonate. And I'm not sure if my colleague, Dr. Helka, is there, but a couple of times we saw more pericardial effusion in neonates, and we were always wondering whether it is COVID related or not. Because pericardial infusion in neonates is very rare. And then there is something called the MISC, or the Multi-Inflammatory Syndrome in children. And these have been found to occur more. Out of all those children infected, over 450,000, in the UK, they have recorded 5,800. So it is relatively rare, but it is present, and we have to have a high index of suspicion. They look very similar to Kawasaki disease and other inflammatory diseases. Now coming to Tanzania, we have the vaccine in Tanzania, and you heard Professor Liamwe. The special committee, which was nominated by the president, looked into the science, effectivity, safety, procurement, and distribution. Given all those other factors, what you heard from both, it was found that these two candidate vaccines are probably the best ones for our setup. The Johnson & Johnson, the Janssen company, and the Sputnik Light, which has been approved in the Zanzibar Drug Authority and agreed to roll out there with the NGOs and others. But for us in the mainland, it is Johnson & Johnson. For various reasons, we find that is the best one given our circumstances, including freezer requirements. So what are the properties of an ideal vaccine? Number one, it should prevent you from the disease. It should interrupt the spread. The immunity should be long-lasting. And they should be free from risks of any side effects. That's what we are coming to. And there should be no deaths and serious complications. Maybe we need a booster. Now you see the pediatricians here, they'll tell us that initially we used to have measles only at 9 months. Now we have measles at 9 months and 18 months. We used to have only 3 doses or 4 doses of oral polio at birth, then at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks. Now at 14 weeks, we have intramuscular polio. The reason is the oral polio reduced a lot, but there are mutations in the wild virus of polio which doesn't go with the oral polio vaccine. It has to be intramuscular. So that's why we have introduced. So it is not something strange that you vaccinate and then you change and add another vaccine or give another booster. It's nothing surprising. It has happened time immemorial. And we heard about the stages of vaccine trials. It will help you from getting sick. In the US, it is very effective. Now here I want to say something. The US went with a bang about vaccine, 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 vaccine. But they're anti-vaxxers. And because of the so-called democracy, this is a problem. Sometimes too much democracy is a problem. If I have in my house that the child has to sit down and do his homework, then there is no need of democracy. Excuse me, my son, do you want to do the homework? You have the right to decide whether you want to do the homework or not. Then it becomes a problem. That's why in the US, the coverage is only 47%, despite that all the Walmarts and the CVS pharmacies and others, they are offering free football tickets, the basketball, whatever, football tickets, free if you go get a vaccine. Still, it's 47%. So sometimes I think I really miss Hayati. Get the vaccine, no question, would be the best thing to do. Maybe we can discuss that outside. So a combination of getting vaccinated and following the CDC, WHO, and African Union recommendations should be done. And the faster we vaccinate, the better we can return to normal lives. Now let's talk about safety. Tens of thousands of people have been vaccinated. They are not just dropping dead on the street. In fact, none of them is dropping dead, right? But there are side effects. And one side effect then becomes exaggerated and becomes too much. So if you are going to the childhood immunization program, there is 1 into 100 and, not really 100 and, 1 into 170,000 children after getting the DPT vaccine get that severe, very high fever and severe screaming nightmare attacks at night with the DPT vaccine. Have we stopped it? 1 is 170. We have never stopped it. Some children get, sciatica because the vaccinator gave it in such a way, kwamba kidogo amelema kidogo for a few months na anaendelea na physio mpaka anakuwa okay. Naweza kuwa hata athlete akaenda Olympics. There are no side effects seen with these vaccines as such, but the vaccine side effects can be due to the vaccine itself, or as you heard Professor when he said about the preservative and the excipients and other chemicals which are put to stabilize the vaccine. So those can create anaphylaxis reaction or things, and we will see that what are they. And you have pain and tenderness on the injection site, little fever, headache, muscle ache, and fatigue. These are the side effects of the vaccine. Actually, for all the vaccines, it becomes so easy for me to say this is, for all the vaccines, these are the side effects. Effectiveness, whether 1 dose or 2 doses. So some vaccines require 1 dose. And that's easier for us because it's 1 dose and you are done. Some require 2. And now you can hear from the media that the Pfizer vaccine in the US, they are considering giving the 3rd dose. Professor Anthony Fauci is saying probably we should give the 3rd dose in different categories because the immunity starts waning out. So in Tanzania, we have these regulatory affairs which are taken very seriously. According to the framework we have in Tanzania, it gives them the mandate to agree to use the vaccine or to reject it. So the Ebola vaccine was developed at the shortest possible time globally, and nobody screamed about it. The Ebola vaccine at the shortest time. And we were one of the people who wanted to get into the Ebola vaccine trial because it was causing a high mortality, rapidly fatal. So likewise, now here, we have this authority. I want to draw your attention to this book. This is an excellent document produced by the Ministry of Health, Community Development, Gender, Elderly, and Children. and a lot of science has gone in. There are some here in this field who are wanakamati inside. But I think from my experience, there is one thing which is missing. One very important thing that's missing. There has been no preliminary study done to see the acceptability by the community. In order to know where do we want to go to remove the kasumba, I mean the negative thinking. If the community research is done, there are a lot of research now going on, but it has not been published yet. There are some from KCMC and Bugado, a few papers on it, but they are not significant. To see what is the level of acceptability. In my research, we have 28 people, and they were offered vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine in Tanzania. 5 of them said, wala usiseme, siigusi mimi. And 23 went for the vaccine. Here, there was a free vaccine with all the facility, but there was anti-vax. There was either there is fear or there is misconceptions, and therefore research has to be done and put into this document. I remember once Professor Renji, he was telling me, this word is very catchy. He said, mosque against mosquitoes. Mosque against mosquitoes. They went to Bagamoyo, and what they did, they actually went to the mosque on Friday prayers and said, huyu shehe inatakiwa atangaze the use of insecticide-treated nets. So mosque against mosquitoes. You know what I mean in a broader sense. This is very important to see. Where do we have these anti-vaxxers wamezalishwa wapi, wanatokea wapi, and what is it we can do to mitigate the negative impact of anti-vaxxers? Post-authorization, nimesema hiyo, Professor amezungumza, regulatory affairs amezungumza. We also are regulated by the SADC and WHO and other alliances. What are the vaccines available? You heard about them all. This is an mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer. Requires a lot of storage problems, like until -70 and things. But it stimulates the immune system by producing active T cells. So sometimes it may overstimulate, and therefore you get signs and symptoms very similar to the disease, but at a lower level. So these are the side effects. AstraZeneca, same. It is delivered through adenovirus. And the side effects, the adenovirus is attenuated. It cannot cause disease. And the vector is, the viral vector is put inside, you get it, and the human cells start manufacturing the proteins and anti-proteins. What about interchangeability? So currently, there are studies going on and there is a review in Lancet saying that if you got AstraZeneca, then the next dose for the booster gets another variety with another mechanism. It boosts the immunity even further. We don't know about this, but it's going on. So keep our eyes open on this. So if you have had Janssen and Pfizer comes in after 6 months or 9 months, then you take Pfizer again to boost the immunity because they have a different mechanism. That's an adenovirus carrier, and that is a mRNA vaccine. Similar here. Now the problem with AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, is does not contain preservatives, so it has to be produced real time and given very fast before it gets. Likewise with AstraZeneca. With AstraZeneca, the problem is it has to be fresh. That's why if you stay a longer time, there is a tendency of reducing its potency. So the side effect is you get an injection and you think you are immune, but you are not. That's why we don't want AstraZeneca. We want Johnson & Johnson, or we want Sputnik. Again, the systemic reactions can be due to the various things inside: tiredness, headache, chills, muscle pain, joint pain, and fever. And these are universal, as you can see. These are the ingredients other than the vaccine itself. You see? So ethanol, sucrose, sodium chloride, disodium editate, magnesium chloride. You can be allergic to any one of them. Side effects. So it is very effective. It is very safe. The side effects are bearable, tolerable, and they do not cause mortality. If there is mortality due to vaccine, then there are other things. So let's talk about mortality due to vaccine. AstraZeneca was found to have mortality. 79 people at the age of around 40 to 55 developed thromboembolism and died. It was fatal thromboembolism. 79 people. 79 out of how many million of those who got AstraZeneca? That you must say. Because if you say 79 people, it's too much. 79 people dying of thromboembolism in this, God forbid, in this house, is too many. But 79 out of millions who have got the AstraZeneca vaccine is nothing. And public health specialists will tell you that it is fine to have one of them if you are able to solve 1 million. And that's why we are continuing with childhood vaccinations. You see? So it was found that this thromboembolism have a very specific group of individuals, women who had a higher BMI, and they already had a tendency of thromboembolism. And the disease causes thromboembolism. So the side effects are very closely related to the disease. In other words, if you say the other side of the point, the vaccine was very effective to create a clinical syndrome. That's why they developed those complications. So if you have a fever, it means you are taking up, you are seroconverting. Anyway, a lot of other side effects and things are still being followed up because phase 4 is still going on. And we are not going to become zombies for those who will get the vaccine. That is for sure. But if you don't get the vaccine and we continue wearing this mask, the hypoxic brain injury is going to create us zombies. So guys, please take the vaccine so we reduce these hypoxic brain injuries. So the Sputnik Light is one dose, very similar to Johnson & Johnson. The WHO has given what you call a contingent approval. They refuse to approve this for use in Europe and other countries because in one of the manufacturer plants, not manufacturer, one of the filling plant, they got the vaccine and they were filling. In the bottle, there was little contamination. They said, no, a very good reason not to get this vaccine popular in the Europe. But it's very popular in the Eastern side. Very, very popular, including. The thing is, we have so many cases happening in Russia, despite they have the Sputnik, because only 20% are vaccinated. If they were 80% vaccinated, they would not get the disease. That's the problem. And number two, Sputnik is the name of the spacecraft, which overtook. Actually, when Apollo was supposed to go first before Sputnik, Sputnik went. And they declared that we are the first people on the moon. And they were so angry with the Cold War going on. They said, Sasa, the vaccine, these guys got the vaccine done by August, September. Whereas in the US, the Pfizer, they started in December. Story 79.4% efficacy, and it is very cheap one. It is not a single death has been reported so far with the Sputnik Light dose. the one which is now available in Zanzibar, along with the Johnson one. This is again adenovirus. So now let's go to the variant. We are now considering the variant of interest, variant of concern, variant of interest, mamba potentially Nazaqua, and the variant of concern means it is causing the disease and mortality and morbidity and things. Now this variant started sometime last year. And we had the South African variant, the UK Kent variant, and then the Brazil variant, and the Indian variant. The Indian variant is called the double variant because there are 2 points of mutation within the same virus. And it is more transmissible, 40% more transmissible. But all these vaccines, I'll show you the New England Journal paper in a short time about these variants. So I'll just quickly browse through these variants. We are planning to target currently 11 million population, which is 20% of Tanzania, to start with. This is according to what Professor Makubi said in the Citizen on 23rd. That we plan 11 million. And that is also written in that book, which I'm talking about, that we plan 11 million. Why 11 million? Is it a miraculous number? We are a 60 million population. Half of us are less than 15 years old. That means we have now to target 30 million. And if we target 30 million, if we target 11 million of the highly vulnerable ones, then we will be achieving a good milestone. So we start with 11 million, then we can continue. So the target is 20% of the population should be covered, which will require 11 million doses. We got only 1 million. So it is a scramble. Once it is distributed, we should rush for it. We should not be complacent about it. We should not drag off it. So these emerging variants have got a problem. They are more transmissible, and we don't know if the virus goes on staying on and on, we might have more variants and mutations. So we need to do something to prevent that to happen. Important findings in the context of Tanzania, that we need at least 50% vaccinated. Okay? And hence the urgent rollouts is required. New England Journal of Medicine, considering all those variants which you can see up there, they found results here. You can see, you can browse the results. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine paper recently. And in my pediatric group, Dr. Parvina has actually sent this for all of us to read. So let's read that one. But this is Jamie and Ramsey who have written this paper. And you can see the results were similar in both the vaccines. They did the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca. That when you give 2 doses, it was 93.7% effective with the Alpha variant and 88% effective with the Delta variant. So clinically and statistically, there was not much difference. And the AstraZeneca, as you can see here, 74.5 with 2 doses and 67% with the variant. So again, clinically and statistically not significant. So these vaccines are still useful for the variant as well. The future, we want to manufacture our own vaccine. Serum, to see tegemea sana your donations na nini. So you might have seen Tony Blair coming in the country out of blue. There is Tony Blair Institute for Global Change and discussing about vaccine manufacturing in Africa, why it takes and why it matters. This is an important document. If you go and browse this, you will see what they are doing. For example, in Rwanda and South Africa. And then, lastly, how do you wash well? You see those dark blue areas? Those are the most frequently missed ones. That is why you are told and the thumb. So don't forget this. It's important. And face mask slow the spread of COVID-19. If you are vaccinated, you are still possible a carrier. And therefore you should still wear the mask because of the other person next to you. And that is why by wearing a mask, it is called an act of altruism. So I'll end here. I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Nancy, for that exciting presentation. Our next discussant is Dr. Erasto Pagioba. As you can see from the program, that unfortunately we have to connect to the conference. And Dr. Joseph Otieno has kindly agreed to step in and present instead. Dr. Joseph Otieno holds a PhD in botany and is currently the director of the District of Medicine here at the University of Health and Health Sciences. And he will come to share his thoughts and ideas regarding the role of alternative medicines in the prevention and therapy of COVID-19. Joseph Otieno, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Don't worry about that man sitting there. It's just to take you away from AstraZeneca, Sputnik, and Johnson and everything into an alternative way of fighting this case. You know, we are fighting very elusive enemy. We cannot use one weapon in the same way. And there's not any weapon that should be looked down at. So pick anything that you feel that will help you. We've just talked on vaccines. And as you've heard that many are hesitant to take vaccine, hopefully, like our university, a medical university, Vice Chancellor will be the first to take that. And he will be followed by deputies. And probably those members of the presidential committee who came with the idea on the vaccine, they will follow up. So those numbers cannot be overemphasized on the case of COVID globally. And the vaccine, we've heard that is available. But currently there's no medically approved drug for COVID. Even the alternative medicine I'm going to talk about can't be stated that they are the real medication for COVID. However, there are various efforts underway, but there is huge records of loss of life. There are even other standard measures like lockdowns, as we all know, but they could be still fueling up the incidences. And even some countries, especially like Tanzania, is falling short of mass screening. But even our health facilities, we've heard that even KCMC and other places are overwhelmed by the patients. So it's not an easy thing. So when we talk of traditional medicine, maybe some may not be knowing what traditional medicines are, but at least that number, 118 drugs today are based on natural sources from plants, fungi, bacteria, animals, such as snakes, snake poisons, and frogs. But there are some plants that are reputed to have the activity against the COVID to date. We look at some. And within the past 2 years, because I'm in the center of research there of traditional medicine, there is a growing interest in traditional medicine. Unfortunately, many colleagues from MUHAS do not come for them. But we've received many who come from the University of Dar es Salaam and elsewhere. And various institutions in Tanzania struggled even to come with something. MUHAS, we came with Rona. It's there, it's sold there. It's one of the best selling. And other institutions like DIMDO, NIMRI, UDOM, UDZM came with their own. I'll present some popular medicinal or herbal plants that are used today. And what these ones were extracted, especially these forms are the main ingredients in the Rona that we've made here at MUHAS. From the literature, we noted that they were researched in India and China. Some of them, they've made 3 activities. One of them, when you take them, they normally block. There are some ingredients that block attachment of the virus at the reception sites for your cells. And if it happens that those viruses are already in the cell, they prevent replications of the viruses. And the third main activity, some have the thinning of blood activity, equivalent to the aspirin, junior aspirin. When you take some of this, especially tangawizi, it has that blood thinning effect. So if you think that aspirin can cause maybe ulcers or anything, then opt for this. This drink is very useful because it has that activity. So this Glycyrrhiza glabra is one of them. It is in the herb that we prepared. And Artemisia annua, that is partly used to make these anti-malarial drugs, is also ingredients of that. And we have Moringa oleifera, that is globally known for its nutritive and medicinal properties. It's one of them. We have pilipili manga. We have Zingiber officinale. We have Allium sativum. And you have Citrus limon. So the only problem with the Citrus limon, you know, in the outbreaks of last year, many people overdrank this. So they developed some, this they call oral what? I don't know, esophageal reflux disease, something like that. And some gastritis. So they developed this. I've heard it from some medical practitioners that many people have developed because of this. Because of worry, they overdrank it. But the rest do not have major side effects. There's no reported side effect for the rest. And the other one is Ocimum basilicum. This is mainly used in nyungu or steaming. And you've heard of the nyungu several times, steam inhalation. And even it was placed somewhere at the NMH premises. Though people were thinking it was not fair to place such a facility in such a lucrative facility like NMH. I cannot say anything about it. But the steam inhalation, like that what you see, you can practice in several different ways, but it sometimes we combine it with some essential oils from plants, and these relieve congestion, aches, and general discomfort of cold and flu. And there are some plants, and if you read the literature, those essential oils can reach the alveoli, and they trigger part of the brain that in turn influence dilation of the bronchial and the bronchioles. So breathing and breathing out or some congestions in your lung tubules is facilitated. In that way, it helps always make breathing easy. So those are some of the mechanisms of these essential oils. But despite of all this and all the benefits that I've just mentioned, there are some challenges. We are not sure of the safety. Though for sure, most of the herbs that you've seen are the common on the table plants. We eat them every day. So with the toxicity, it's guaranteed that they are safe. But maybe the problem is efficacy and IPR issues for the inventors of this. And the other challenge is many medical doctors, including maybe some of you, are not trained in the use of plant medicines. And whenever they hear anything about this, they think that is nonsense. But maybe for those who are in this room. But there is opportunity with the COVID pandemic. This offers an opportunity to engage them to promote the use of medicinal plants in a collaborative way. Another challenge is heavy dependence on African countries on imported pharmaceutics. Sometimes we receive herbal products from China and India. People will receive them positively compared to what is prepared from here. But again, it's true that this herbal medicine that we are using do not have standard of administration. And whenever we propose research, collaborative research with the medical practitioners, they will say, okay, we can do it together, but make sure that those standard drugs form the base. Then your traditional medicines will be as a supplementary. But the problem is, if you do that, are we aware of the drug-herbs interactions? There are possibilities of drug-herbs interactions if you do that. So what's the way forward as I'm getting to the end of this brief presentation? We need to promote transdisciplinary research in order to generate evidence basis of the quality, harmlessness, and efficacy of traditional medicine practices. And this can be done jointly. Lucky enough, in several incidences, we have studied this with other schools here. And really, we are getting useful results that are evidence-based. So we can claim confidently that our medications can contribute to health improvement. But again, the other thing that is lacking is political will. The last president had positive views in this, and he promoted development of most herbal. That is because of political will. If there is political will, people can invest in doing research in these herbal remedies, and we may come with unique medicines in Tanzania. And again, we should not forget nutrition. Good nutrition as a way of upscaling our body immunity. We may not get medicine today, but if we do exercise, we feed well, our immunity will go high. We'll look like people in Kariako who do not wear masks, but you will hardly hear them that they are suffering from this pandemic. Maybe we don't know, I don't know the reason myself, but the body immunity can be improved by good nutrition. But again, African pharmaceuticals initiative should not be aimed at concocting molecules that compete with those of the pharmaceutical industry. What I'm saying, sometimes people feel that we should do research that is equivalent to what is done in America. We should extract plants and come with pure compounds, is when we'll give people. But we say not necessary. Sometimes, depending on our own capacity, we can just use crude extracts that are verified to be active and safe. We can start giving people, and people will be healed. And lastly, maybe it's not concerning many people here, but the issue of intellectual property and protection is a major issue in traditional medicine research. Many people do not want to reveal their knowledge because they feel that their knowledge will be stolen. So they remain with their products and their invention underdeveloped. So they do not help anybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph Otieno, for that exciting presentation, for sharing with us regarding the role of organic medicine in the management of COVID-19. Our next discussant is Professor Multi-Inflammatory Syndrome, who is going to share his thoughts with us regarding myths and beliefs about COVID-19 vaccines and how certain myths and beliefs can be defeated. Before I invite Professor Shabali to come to the podium, may I introduce him to you. Professor Shabali is a professor of medical sciences. He holds a Doctor of Science degree in Public Health from Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health, and he has extensive experience in teaching and research in behavioral aspects in the general and acute populations. He is currently involved in research in different areas, including the acute populations and access to health care, including development of ethical guidelines and policy and research intervention that involve individuals or groups and units of population. May I now call upon Dr. Shabali to come and share the science. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about some of the misconceptions and myths which are so common about COVID-19, not only in our country or in our continent, but when you look into the literature, it's all over the world. And before I get into that, may I first start by saying our beliefs, our feelings towards issues, objects, and people are highly dependent on the messages we get. And if we can go back to childhood, the way we react to different animals, the way we react to the concept of God and what it is highly dependent on not only the messages, but the sources of those messages. If they are positive about the issue, about the person, or about an object, then we tend to develop nice feelings about it. And if the messages were negative, we do the same. Now, when it comes to COVID-19, one of the challenges which we are facing, both in the country and outside the country, is the number of messages which are directed to people. We have what is called an explosion of information using different media and from different sources. And what are these sources? We're all familiar with. We heard from Professor Liamoya and our friend, Professor Manji, issues related to the virus itself, or the vaccine itself, and the virus, and those are good. However, we have to say, the messages make a lot of sense to us because of who we are and our background. Try to imagine Professor Liamoya talking to my grandfather or my father about what he said and the way he's going to pick it. It's going to be very different. That's the nice side of it. From the experts in epidemiology and control of diseases, there are a lot of very good messages which are coming and are targeted to people of different levels of understanding. And for those of you who are familiar with levels of knowledge, there are 6. We have the very simple ones, which more or less everybody can understand. But as the content of the message complexity increases, very few people will pick it up when it comes to what Professor Liamoya was talking about. You can imagine we have people at the level of 4, 5, 6 who can understand. The rest will pick the simple messages. Now, when it comes to what you are getting from the experts, well, there are people who are picking it, but I'll continue with my presentation, examples from these different sources. We do have people who are direct either deliberately or that's what they understand. They interpret it and send messages to the population, and whose impact is going to depend on who is the source. For example, when we have government officials talking about an issue like COVID, depending on what is the background of that particular official and the extent to which his audience looks at this guy and understands the messages is beaming to them, their reaction, their level of knowledge is going to be very different from when an academician does that or a layperson. And we do have government officials who are doing this. Now, when the government officials send messages to the public, the extent to which the public is going to tend to take it is going to be dependent on to what extent is that particular person convinced with what he or she is talking about. If the person is doing it to please you because of your votes, that's a different matter. But if we want you to know so that you can prevent, it can be part of the guide in the army, which is helping us from the academic institutions to provide the kind of knowledge we need to protect ourselves against diseases. The level of the way it's picked by the audience is going to be different. And consequently, you find that we do have colleagues from the government who help us do it, but there are also others who go and provide information, which probably is not what we would like them to talk about. Maybe because they don't know, or it's also possible they may be doing it deliberately for whatever reason. Apart from that, we have the religious leaders, and here again, many of us believe in religion. We had these messages from childhood telling us we should respect religious leaders, and sometimes what they say is the truth. As far as COVID-19 is concerned, I've heard of messages from religious leaders, which if I had an opportunity, if I was the government, I would have said, this is misleading people, and probably you better talk about what the Bible says and what you think people should know, and leave these issues to some experts in the area. However, as they do this, a lot of people believe in what they're saying. If they say COVID-19, anybody who is going to take this vaccine, you will die. There are a lot of guys, there are a lot of people, some of us out there who think if the government brings in the vaccine and they take it, it's going to be against religion, and therefore they're going to die. And that, the way it goes, is going to be against what me and you would like to talk as people who really want to provide messages with people. And with the religious leaders, it's not only the stuff I have heard. I had one of them, I think, today or yesterday, and I was a bit uncomfortable as a person who's interested in educating people with the right messages. But I've seen similar messages from people who are also, who call themselves religious leaders from Europe and the US. The problem with that is whether they are religious leaders or not, there is no way we can really authenticate who they are, but the messages they are bringing to the public lead to the kind of attitudes and knowledge and behaviors which the messages intend to convey, to portray to people. And the same applies even to doctors. I've seen a lot of messages saying, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and they send messages through the different media. And when I listen to the messages, you start questioning whether that person is a doctor. But we don't do things. We don't know whether it's a doctor who decided to convert into that kind of thinking, or it is just a person who is using the title in order for him or her to have his message heard. And I think Professor Yamoya or somebody called about this conspiracy theorists. I've heard a lot of this as I looked into the messages which have been beamed through the electronic media, because I think it's one of the major sources of information, particularly to young people. And unfortunately, there is a lot coming out of that, which, if you listen, has a lot of very unfortunate stories and myths, which examples of which I'm going to point out in a few minutes. And then we do have those guys to whom science is a sin, and that many of these, particularly from the American cultural system, there are a lot of people who do not even believe about the Americans, and they have a very good access here if they come in the form of either they may be volunteers, or they may just pass the messages to different media, and these people sending messages which deny all what has been said about viruses, COVID-19, its mode of transmission, and so on. And these messages are beamed to our populations, who pick them and understand them depending on the type of person, his level of understanding, and the kind of messages he wants to hear. And we do, again, as an example, have the pharmaceutical industry is also a source. These are the people who are manufacturing some of these vaccines. And whenever they bring their messages, some of them are very good, but one will wonder, are these messages really intending to educate you in order to prevent you from potential consequences of COVID-19? Or could this be, they are doing this in order to make money? That is something which will depend on the reasoning of the individual who is listening to that. And the lay people, and there are many of them, whenever they get information, distorted it might be, from whatever source, there are also going to be other sources of information to colleagues who will give them an opportunity to interact. And generally speaking, given the various sources of information since the outbreak of COVID-19, we have all sorts of people coming with their messages, beaming them to different audiences, and consequently, a lot of these messages lead into the facts, which we know and all of us benefit from. Some of them are myths, and they have an audience which will listen to them. And once they listen to it and yield, it will be extremely difficult for us to go and undo it, because they'll continue disseminating it to the general public. And we also, there are also some other misconceptions which are coming from these people going to communities. The slides are not moving. Okay, now if we say, if you look into, yeah, okay. We now look into the myths, and I'm just taking examples of those which I have come across with. For quite some time, we have had people saying the vaccines which have been developed change our DNA. And the basis for this, we don't know, but one can imagine this is fear, which has probably been created in our people for people to reject some of this. We also have others who, for whatever reason they know, have come up with the information that the vaccines once you get vaccinated, then you can be identified by whoever is behind that. Unfortunately, there is no one to tell people, if we vaccinate 10 million people, who on earth is going to be interested in you as an individual out of that? And there are better ways of getting you if there is need to do that. However, these messages are there. I also heard of people who are saying the vaccines will make you a magnetic field. And how this came about and why people will take it, you don't know. But I've seen people, again, from the electronic media, who will take a piece of iron and put it on the vaccination site and somehow tell people that, look, this thing harms. And I don't believe that is true, but whoever is getting those kinds of messages will believe that is the case, and therefore vaccines are not necessary for us. I've also heard of people talking about vaccines being made to harm Africans. If you ask me why somebody should do that, we don't know. And the clothes we're putting on, the machines, the medicine, the medication, all the vaccines which we've been using, including smallpox, were made by the same guys. If they wanted to eliminate us, probably they could have used the vaccines. But again, we have to remember the people to whom these messages are targeted do not have the opportunity or the ability to look into these issues that way. They require somebody else who has exposure to this to come and correct it. We also, the issue of vaccines having a high mortality rate has been raised. And as an example, I remember in Europe, when they started vaccinating, there were, I think, something like 17 deaths which occurred. And these were used as a reason to reject the vaccines. And the person who portrayed those messages did not bring in the denominator. You delete the denominator. They had vaccinated 27 million people who were, many of them probably never got any sign of the vaccine, and only 17 out of 27 million died. You delete the 27 people who are saved, and you talk of those who died. And the moment you do that, the message is very strong. And when I remember talking to some young people who were saying, yeah, but these people died. And somebody said, in a war, we send the soldiers to die in order to save the population. And that's very common in our use. And then there is also this, what I call the use of traditional medicine methods for dealing with biomedical health challenges. And when these are not used properly, we end up with the problems. What do I mean by this? Biomedicine has a very different way of looking at diseases and coming up with the so-called solution, the medication, the vaccines, and so on. If for some reason we have an alternative system which does not follow the same mechanism, the people we have trained in biomedicine will probably have a lot of difficulties agreeing with what is being said. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm picking very wide examples. A lot of Tanzanians died during the Babu Aloliondo time. Babu Aloliondo had a concoction of a mixture of roots, boiled, and he had a cup which you have to take and from him. And if you take that cup, it was curing TB, it was curing malaria, it was curing HIV/AIDS, it was a cure for cancer, it was a cure for everything. I think Babu was right. But the cancer Babu was talking about, the HIV Babu was talking about, and all those chronic communicable and non-communicable diseases Babu was talking about with his cup is not the same, they are not the same diseases we talk about in biomedicine. And unfortunately, nobody until today, many people left, were taken from wards, critically ill, many died there, some died on the way, and until today as we're talking, nobody among us has stood up and said, we made a mistake. People should have been informed and be told the truth. So Babu Aloliondo went with it. A lot of souls, and those of us who should have stopped it, we didn't do it. And until today, nobody has ever said what happened should never be repeated again. And because it has never been said, unless we correct ourselves, we are likely going to have a similar instance, not after long. Who should address this myth? And this is another key interesting thing. When I was a young person in the university, we used to talk about medical pluralism. And medical pluralism in our system technically means we have our traditional medicine and we have a lot of respect for those old men and women who are doing that, because they are also dealing with problems which biomedicine probably not be able to handle, because among other reasons, we're not there. We don't have enough medicines. We don't have enough healthcare providers. And they've been taking care of people for years. And we used to respect that. We respect those people. And as we did that, we were training our biomedical people at the same time, telling them if somebody has malaria, these are the symptoms. If somebody has a viral infection, this is what it is. If bacteria, this is what it is. And here are the antibiotics, blah, blah, blah. Those are not the same. We don't know what the traditional medicine colleagues out there are used in their training, which leads into you knowing the drugs and how to deal with it. We used to respect it. And I remember during our training, we used to tell medical students, you go to Bagamoyo, you find this child with all sorts of pieces of clothes, with some piece of paper written in Arabic, with all sorts of other things. You must respect that. But that child must be humanized. And you ask the lady, what is the use of this? This is for preventing my child from diseases. This is excellent. Let me also put my, it will work with yours here. And you know, yours is going to prevent the children from getting measles. And she believes hers, which you know is harmless, is okay. And the moment we mix things, we're likely going to make our people also mistrust us, mistrust both sides. If it's biomedicine, I remember way back in the 90s going into a traditional healer when we were doing some studies, and we found one of them with a stethoscope. Well, when we saw that, a stethoscope is something which is sold there, and maybe he went to the hospital, he saw some doctors using it, and he liked it. And he took it up there, and he probably also use it, put it on the foot or wherever of his patient. That's fine. Okay? And the key thing is they used to do very good jobs for us at that time, and we don't have people to do that. And for that reason, we said, well, we in biomedicine we have to be also very careful when you see something which we think is not probably is not going to do the work, and you have to say it. And in a similar way, when the traditional medicine men and women see us encroaching into their area, they tell us, be careful. And we have all sorts of forums to make sure that things work. For that reason, I would say that the myths and misconceptions which have come up are things which I think we need people who know, who are cognizant about the virus, and they have the right knowledge, so that when they talk to the people, they'll give them the right information. That those can be created not necessarily from the health profession, other colleagues who work with us in addressing the problem. We just have to discuss, give them the information, and they do it with us. Secondly, those of us who are in the field, in the health, public health, and healthcare in general, we also want, and I think it will be really nice for our general public to get the right information which is going to address the myths which have been sent out. And if we don't address these myths, we should not be surprised if, when it comes to vaccinating people, some of our healthcare providers are going to be harmed, because they may be perceived as people who are going to do harm to the communities. So for me, I'll recommend that we, the healthcare providers, public health people, we should not allow what happened with the patients who went to Lyondo. And they came out, nobody said a word, and then the whole thing ended. Nobody knew what was behind that, and we've kept quiet until today for a similar thing to occur again. That we shouldn't. And it's our responsibility, after knowing the biology, the pathogenesis, what happens for people to get infected, to go and tell people this is what you should do to prevent yourself from COVID-19. And we have to tell them, and it has been mentioned here, the problem with COVID-19 is not death, as people probably take it at the moment. It is the high speed at which it spreads, and therefore many people become infected, and as they get infected, then a few, maybe 5%, will end up with severe disease, and some of those, maybe 3%, 1%, will die out of that. And that the correct information will remove the fear, and we then provide them with the information of preventing themselves from getting infected by putting on barakoa, using sanitizers, hand washing, and keeping social distance. If we do that. And we need also to get information on what challenges the public is facing in implementing some of these recommendations. Once we get that information, we'll be able to develop means of making sure that we prevent, we provide them with the correct information in order to facilitate good prevention of the virus. Other than that, we are likely going to end up with problems which some of us have seen to what happened in India and in Brazil and some of the other countries. We really need to be very careful. And I'm one of the Christians, and I believe that if you are sick, you need treatment. You can pray to God to help your soul, but with COVID-19, prayers are very good, but if they are so efficient, the bishops and the priests in Rome will not have died in large numbers. That is a message which we should also take into consideration when we're talking about preventive methods, so that we don't. It's good for us to feel nice, but if you feel nice and you don't seek proper care, health care, you are likely going to create a lot of problems, not only to ourselves, but to the communities as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, for that liberating discussion, presentation. Before we start our discussion, I may wish now to call in Dr. Siraji Saad. Dr. Siraji Saad, are you there? He is sharing with us his thoughts from Namibia. Dr. Siraji Saad is the acting chief medical officer in Namibia, and he is going to share his experiences regarding the Namibian vaccination program and mortality from COVID-19. He may wish to change the title, but that will be the whole purpose of this. Please. You're welcome, Dr. Siraji.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. Mr. Chairman, Professor Kwesigabo, let me take this opportunity to recognize the protocol as previously established by former presenters. I want to take this time also to say thank you, professors and Dr. Joseph, for making my life very easy, because most of the presentation has been made and a lot has been touched, especially Professor Leshabari. What I'm going to do is to give you some of the vivid or real examples that we went through regarding the COVID vaccine, myth associated with it. So this is the outline. I'm going to be very brief, and then we save some time. So by definition, I would consider it as a widely held but false belief or an idea. That's a myth, and it's synonymous to misconception. I want to remove the barakoa because I'm at home, but I wanted to demonstrate that the moment you walk outside the house and you are not wearing a mask, the fine is equivalent to 300,000 Tanzanian shillings here where we are. So a bit of the profile, the population in Namibia is around about 2.6 million people. And then we registered the first case of COVID-19 on the 13th of March last year. And then we went to a lockdown on the 17th of March. So far, up to 24th of July, we had a cumulative number of cases mounting to 116,603. And then we had recorded or registered a total number of 2,811 fatalities due to COVID-19. So we are using currently 2 vaccines. We have the Sinopharm, which is made from Beijing Institute of Biological Products. And then we have Covishield, that is AstraZeneca. This is one from Serum Institute of India. And from tomorrow, we are going to start with the new line of vaccines, that is Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. So we are starting with the training of those vaccines from tomorrow. So our vaccine program started in March 2021 with a pilot of 2 regions. That was Comas and the Rongo region. And then we went for a rollout for the country in April 2021. But of note that initially, when the initial vaccines were brought in, they were not made for the general public. They were mainly procured for the purpose of, immunizing the healthcare workers, those who are considered at high risk, and some other categories with the comorbidities. That was the purpose. As we mentioned, by March 2021, we had around about 480 mortalities related to COVID-19. Okay, and then we started the vaccination program. The blue line, we have the blue line is the cumulative number of cases, and then we have the green line, which is showing the number of people vaccinated cumulatively. So as you can see, with the pilot 2 regions there in March, then we started to roll out the country at the national level in April. So as you can see, as the green line or the number of people vaccinated is increasing, the number of cases, also positive cases for COVID, was also on the rise. So it is custom in Namibia that on daily basis, the public is being updated on how many new cases, how many people have been vaccinated, and how many people died out of COVID-19. So this observation was being not only limited for the medical or healthcare professionals, but for the general population. So I just added now the red line, which is representing the proportion or percentage of people who died, or percentage increment in the case fatalities related to COVID after the vaccine. So you can see that as a normal person will raise the eyebrows, because they are linking now the vaccination program to the increase in the number of cases, as well as increase in the case fatality. So as healthcare professionals in the line of epidemiology, we had to find exactly what is the reason, because now the public has started talking about the vaccine negatively. Even before we started the vaccination program, there was already myth which were associated with the vaccine, which were now in Europe, so and elsewhere. Now, when we started, people are saying, now we have the evidence, this is what is happening, the vaccine is killing people. Mm-hmm. So before I go to the explanation of what was actually happening and who are the people who are dying, I want to allude to add to Professor Leshabari what he presented on the myth. So people started saying, many people are dying after the vaccination is started, so I will not take the vaccine, okay? And someone saying, the vaccines were rushed. So there's no adequate safety data.
Stick together, not necessarily like-minded people, like scientists. And now, Nyanza na Misinzo,
Okay, sir.
All the science they know about the vaccines.
Sorry, Dr. Kenyan.
That's why it does that. And all that.
Can you hear me?
This is the rest of us. Trump said,
Sorry, there's some interference. Okay. So people were now saying the vaccines were rushed. There is no adequate safety data. We are being used as guinea pigs, so we cannot take the vaccine. Okay, so some were saying the vaccines were developed in Europe and they were not tested on Africans, so we are not going to take the vaccine. And then some were saying AstraZeneca is causing blood to clot and people are dying. Many people are dying without actually going to the specific who is actually dying. And then we also remember when South Africa started with Johnson & Johnson, they immunized about 2,000 healthcare workers, and then they stopped. Okay. Then people are saying, oh, the reason they stopped is because the vaccine is not working. So as healthcare workers, we needed to explain to the lay people to understand exactly what is happening and with evidence. And then others were saying the vaccine is causing male or men to be infertile and lose libido. And vaccine sites is become magnetized, as Professor mentioned earlier. And then some were actually saying, you know, this space race, Elon Musk, SpaceX mission. So people and 5G, saying people are using as antenna because of the vaccine is the way they are delivering those systems to make sure they save on the antenna development. And then we can actually be remotely controlled. Then some went to say you can put a bulb and actually light it on the vaccination site. Okay. Others say all those who are vaccinated, and some claimed actually to have been working at bigger, vaccine pharmaceutical companies, say everyone who took the vaccine after 2 years they'll be dead. Okay, and then as also Prof said, there was a group of doctors. I shared some of the clips with the event organizers, the people who claimed to be actually medical professionals, who were saying, the vaccine should not be taken. There are other factors which were causing hindrance, which are related now to events that are happening somewhere else. Like the time when there was an outbreak in India. And then remember the vaccine, one of the vaccine we are using is Covishield, which is made by, Serum Institute of India. They are saying the Indians are now dying because of the vaccine. And now we are also using the same vaccine. We want us to die. Okay, we will not take it from India. Okay, when Namibia now went to the third wave, of COVID outbreak, that was merely 2 months after the vaccination program started, as we saw earlier. Then there was some message in the media saying all those countries that are vaccinating with Sinopharm have more people dying now. Actually, this clip was linked to some Western pharmaceutical companies. So this was much more of a pharmaceutical company battling the other, more business oriented. So people are saying this is because of the vaccine from China. So we'll not take it. There was also another leadership component whereby some high-profile leaders were expected to show the way to become vaccinated, and they didn't. So people are saying, They know the content of the vaccine. That's why they are not going to do the vaccination. And no, they know what is in the vaccine. They want all us dead, and then they can continue looting or something like that. And then there was also some videos showing leaders somewhere, not in Namibia now, but these were clips which were circulating, that they were taking water jabs, and some were being like shown to be vaccinated with the lid closed. You know, the needle is not exposed. There's still a lid. So they say, no, these are lying to us. Or they are just trying to do it in front of the camera to make us go to the trap. So there are some geopolitical factors. Recently, we had the issue of Schengen digital visa in EU, where European Medicine Agency in June 24th announced the list of vaccine or people who are vaccinated that were to be allowed in European countries, Schengen country. So they left out Covishield in the list initially in Sinopharm. So then people are saying, no, you see, we have been saying these vaccines are not real, they are fake ones. Even the European people don't take this one. So the vaccine developers in India had to go and start negotiating now with the European Council to see that their vaccine is also registered. Some of the recruitment agents here, for instance, the potential, when we are starting the vaccine enrollment, they issued out a circular. These are more of based in, they are recruiting agents for mainly CDC and other Western organization. Then they say our employees should not partake in the rollout, in the current rollout of the vaccine. That was April. So initially, remember, the list was not including J&J and Pfizer. And then we are saying there's this Bill and Melinda Gates agenda to depopulate Africa. Okay, and then they were quoting that, Bill Gates said we will be collecting bodies from the street in Africa. And now remember, we were having a surge on the red line there. So we wanted to find out exactly how do we make the people understand by addressing each myth one after another. So first we needed to address the issue of the escalating number of cases in COVID. So samples were taken to do the genotyping to see what kind of virus are we dealing with. So 17 out of 18 samples that were taken to various labs in the world, including Germany, we confirmed to have Delta virus around May and June, which was driving the epidemic. Then this was a national press release, which was distributing the information of what is causing now, what is driving the outbreak at this moment. So 17 out of 18 samples analyzed, they confirmed Delta virus variant. Previously, we were having only the South African variant. So this was a new kid in the street. And then who were people dying now? We had to go back and try now to explain to the community on those people who are dying, who are actually dying in relation to the vaccine. So like June and July, if we start in June, you can see that the big box there, the black one, 669 people who died in total. Close to 80% of those were not vaccinated. None had even a single shot of vaccination. And then we had a small number of people who were less than 2%, who were having the first dose of either of the vaccine. And then we had recorded 3 cases where these were fully vaccinated, and then that is their age group. One was 63 years old, 70 years old, and 70 years old with other comorbidities. This can explain something, as Professor Liamuya was mentioning in the presentation. It's probable that in that age group category, this is the age group category which many studies or trials were not including. Okay, so but we can see that there is probably a slow response in their immune response after the vaccination. Okay, but they were also having other comorbidities. And then for those who were having their first vaccine, the first shot, most of them had a very short time period from the time they got vaccinated. And we found out there is another trend. Now people are reluctant to come and get vaccinated, but then they find out, oh, a relative or a friend tested positive for COVID-19, which means if you are a close contact to someone who tested positive, the proper thing to do is to go and have a test for COVID-19. But people were coming to get the vaccine instead of getting the test done. And at this moment, when we are doing the vaccination, we are not, COVID-19 status is not a prerequisite. So we don't test people to find out their status before they get the vaccination. So people are exposed, then they come to get the vaccination, and then after a few days, they are having symptoms, and then they say, some of them will die because of that. The time is within two weeks from the date of taking the vaccine. And then in July, almost a similar trend, about more than 80% of people who died were not vaccinated, and only one person had full vaccination, and that was 86 years old man. So it is hampering on the progress. So as I said earlier, we brought this initial vaccination for the healthcare workers and the people who are at high risk, but we ended up now rolling it out to the general community because some were to expire, some were having a short shelf life. So we had to roll out countrywide, including anyone else who needed the vaccine. And then with the first dose, as of 24th July, that was the number. And then cumulative vaccination with the second dose, what, around 44,000. So Professor presented that the world coverage at this moment is around about 13%. So as we are at around 5% coverage with the first dose, and then with that rate now, based on our population, if we were to target 96% of the coverage, we'll probably need 8 years. But most of the reason that we are being slowed down is the myth that we need to address. We have taken steps. We know the major drivers of the social media coverage. We are engaging the religious leaders, talking about this issue of vaccination in the churches, and then the politicians. It is only recently that even our Minister of Health went for the vaccination. But we have seen now that the uptake is becoming high. Many people are showing up for the vaccine, and things are changing on the ground. You can see that even the number of people who are dying, you see, is going down because we are improving on the coverage. And then the uptake is going up. The number of cases currently is slowing down. We had up to more than 2,000 cases a day. So for now, we are down to like 700, 500 that we used to have before. Okay. With that, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity, and that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Larkin. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajich, and we appreciate your participation. We shall now proceed with the discussion session, and we request you to be around so we can pick up some questions. Can I now invite all the discussants to sit at the high table, please? So that we can take questions. I guess the participants must be having a number of questions because the presentation is very exciting. And when you ask your question, please direct it to a particular discussion so that we can get into this. I take note that
all participants.
there are participants online who will also be given a. Can we start now? Yes, please.
Okay. Actually, mine is not a question, that's a request to Professor Yamuya. So what did you conclude in our presentation? So what is your take-home message? We have corona, we have vaccine in Tanzania. So what is the message as an advice to the government? This is to Professor Yamuya and his.
Thank you. We shall take a round of questions before the chapter. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Okay, I don't know who is the right person to answer. The question is, the way I see the vaccine rollout process, starting from the developed countries, which most of them is trickling down slowly to the developed world. It's a little bit like a cat and mouse chase. Because every time the vaccine comes from there, first of all, the rollout in the numbers is very slow. In the process, we know that because of circumstances in the environment and many other things, including the ones of the host, as well as the virus keeps on mutating. So every time we are trying to push forward the agenda of vaccination, at the same time we hear now there's a new variant and then there's more spreading. And that brings a case of unequal distribution of the vaccination. I think that is a huge bottleneck as far as combating the COVID is concerned.
Yes,
We look at the vaccination rollout, and I'm sure that will be even more dangerous and even more spreading faster. So how do we cut this case and what should the government, particularly in the African countries,
let's meet tomorrow.
cut this cat and mouse?
Thank you. In line with what other asked, I want to ask about the traditional approach. Is there, you're saying the new is working well, the tangawizi and the mouse. Is there any research that has been done so far to show the effectiveness of this traditional approach to drink and use? So any research done so far?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much. My question goes to Raji. Yes, wondering the line proportion of questions that you are going at vaccination. Whether they establish other disease conditions that would have contributed to the damage rather than just using the vaccine drugs.
Thank you.
you very much on the additional set on MNH. A lot of questions have been asked about also this addition or other addition. So, Dr. Shabani talked about the needs and the process of management. I think the problem is stretched on. Again, the professor studying on the platforms and the Guillain-Barré syndrome that is now coming from the steps on the electronic media system. So when you can have a comment about that, with additional comment on the suggestion that also the part, such as around, I think that we are seeing the COVID conspiracy is going on in the media everywhere. And actually the problem is very deep. And I think this forum should open up the public so that we discuss this in detail. And I think there are government agencies all the university example. I think now we should now sit back as the professionals and let these people who do conspiracy just do what they want. I think we can also we should also stand up and go out there and educate Tanzanians like the benefits of the vaccine. We should have the approach, maybe program to sit with the religious people, different groups of business people, small and big ones, politicians, media, so that we can check the right information so that people can understand what are the benefits of the vaccine. So I think as the university and as the scientists, we should not sit back. We should go out there because there are a lot of platforms that we can use to advise the public on the benefit of vaccine. As we are seeing, every day when there is gathering in the different part of the country, elsewhere. As there's gathering, we are receiving patients in our wards. And there's a speaking, I think we know to the clinician, when we see these patients over. If you go, for example, to MNH, our isolations are full, the patients, our ICUs are full, and we cannot sit back. What happened in January and February will not repeat again. So as something we should step up and talk in the family and tell the public the importance of the vaccine. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe one question from any person online. Who could that be? Anybody who is raising up their hand? Yeah, so if not, maybe let's respond to this first set of questions while we are preparing for the second set. And one thing this can come now is there has to be some form of implementation which has to be rolled out so that what we are discussing here can now go beyond the border of this. As far as the interventions against COVID are concerned, and especially this issue of theories that other people are advocating for other statements that at the end of the day they are counterproductive as regards interventions against COVID. So please, and the responses.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, there was a question regarding what I should consider to be the take-home message for the government or what I presented. And after showing that there are several interventions that have been demonstrated. My take-home message is that the government should promote vaccination as an additional intervention for addressing the COVID epidemic. In many diseases, if you want to have effective control and preventive strategies, then you have to combine multiple interventions that have been demonstrated to be used. With the HIV epidemic, for example, combined interventions using social behavioral approaches, biomedical approaches, have all contributed to a significant decline in the incidence and prevalence of HIV in the world. Likewise, if we use combined approaches for the control of COVID, we are likely to succeed. So vaccines should be promoted alongside the other interventions. There was another issue of the emergence of variants and what should governments now do in order to track. I think the most important thing here is to make sure that we have surveillance of the strains that are moving around. As you have surveillance, you also study the behavior of the epidemic with increasing vaccination of different groups of people. And along the way, you will find some information that will be useful to guide further. Already we have evidence that some of the vaccinations are kind of cross-cutting in terms of the immune response that is produced. It can not take care of multiple variants. And I'm sure if we increase the vaccine coverage, the immunization coverage, the immunological pressure that we require in a society will also affect the way the variants come about. It may actually suppress it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Namuya. Maybe the next discussion we have, I understand there are a number of questions that are one can be, how do you go the efficacy of the substance program?
Yeah, before I say yes or no, whether NUMBU is effective or not, NUMBU is just a synonym of a popular practice, all practice. Skin inhalation, there are different synonyms. Skin inhalation, skin therapy, these are practice that has been there for years. And it was not designed for this case we're talking about now, but it was designed for management of upper respiratory diseases, skin infections, mental disorders. But again, this just come by the way. About 2 months, I attended a symposium that was organized by NMH at the Mologanzila campus. There was a presentation of the study done on this skin therapy against COVID-19. It was not done in Tanzania, it was done, I don't know the publication, but it was done in one of the countries in Latin America. There was a result that it is effective. But the problem was the number of respondents, or number of patients included in that test was very low. So there was a proposal that the number should be increased at least to come with a realistic results. Otherwise, with the number used, they found out that it was effective. So maybe because NMH has set that facility and they say that they are doing a research, maybe we wait for the result that will come from that.
Maybe I have one follow-up question on that. I understand the alternative remedies that are used are even approved by separate, but are moving a separate structure. And at the end of the day, all of them end up being different. Now, isn't that a reason why you may not be subjecting the remedies at the moment in the clinical trial approach compared to other ways of working? Or you like to propose that clinical trial in a clinical trial?
Currently, what is done, these are treated as second category herbal products that do not pass through the rigorous experimentation on clinical trials. But what can be done is clinical research. After preclinical tests, that is done on animals or done on microbes or laboratories, then it can be subjected to clinical observation based on a huge number. But if you want to come up with clinical observation, it's too expensive. It's too expensive because we were told by the ministry that clinical observation for one head will cost up to 500 million. So many few institutions can afford that, but the institution can come with basic safety trials. That is what the clinical observation rather than clinical trials.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess you have some. Yeah, I think the what my colleague is saying, what we are careful because you don't go to the culture of the Sukumas and you want to go and behave like if you're in the police. If you do that, you are likely going to just become around. And consequently, if we really want medicine, there are standard ways of testing medicines, and the moment you say these are medicines for this particular condition, they are not only for Tanzanians, they must be useful everywhere in the world. And if that is to be the case, then the methods used for saying this has to be in such a way that it is going to convince people who are doing treatment in the world. If it is not, then it becomes Tanzanian and it may be more social. One of the things that we do, I saw even during the COVID epidemic, I even saw an attempt to come up with their own disease classification. Which was a bit of a surprise because in the international community, if you want to be a member of the international community, you have to go by the rules of the international community. You cannot call this COVID-19 and after a while you call it a problem with source infection. What you are doing is you are really making a mockery of the whole profession. And I think it's up to the health professionals to stand up. If you want to be part of the world community, we become part of it. And if you want, of course, we can come up with our own things. But if you do that, you have to be careful what are the implications. And consequently, I don't believe a clinical trial is something that really works. It's expensive because it's in reality, people can look at the amount from other people. If we see it going to work. But unless there are clinical trials, it will be extremely difficult to convince the international people, even Tanzania, what is the disease and what's the treatment. If you cannot convince them by coming up with the methodology of looking into the efficacy of that particular using methods which will defend themselves and nobody else in the world is approved. Thank you. Dr. Siraji, you have a question to respond to, and this is what is the take-home message, either to the government or to the communities. Are you there?
Yes, I'm there, but I'm not sure if I got the question right. What was the question?
What is the take-home message from what you just presented?
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so we need to carefully prepare before the rollout of the vaccine countrywide, because if we don't find out first what are the held beliefs at the moment, generally, and what are specific beliefs related to specific vaccine, then we are unlikely to proceed. Then the leadership in terms of now government officials or traditional healers or leaders, the religious leaders, need to be brought on board. I say before even we started, I have noticed that some politicians already have started the negative campaign of the vaccine even before it is started. So from the side of the government now, we have a lot of ground to catch up, to demystify what already the public is having. If today you are going to get the a simple research to find out what are the held beliefs in the community of the myth, you can easily find them, and then we start by addressing those ones. Otherwise, this can be a very much determinant factor in terms of how we progress with the rollout of the vaccine.
Thank you very much. That's some people are saying what is happening now in Tanzania is just because the healthcare professionals have been quiet for so long. And therefore, they have given room for other non-professional people to come out with their own ideas and start pretending to be medical professionals. So I'm wondering whether we have maybe to put up some guidance strategies to ensure that now we, the health professionals, are supposed to come up with strategies to speak to the public so that we can now know what to do. Now, that's good for thought. And we have the second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to also thank the discussants for excellent overview. My question is probably for Professor Yamia as well as Professor Kami. Professor Yamia highlighted all the different types of vaccine which have been developed and the different phases through which the vaccine process goes from to the stage of approving it for use. We talked of safety and immunogenicity, dosage, the behavior of the vaccine differently in the efficacious trials. I didn't hear, maybe there was no time, of any adverse events associated with any vaccine. One, and two, what considerations went into selecting the vaccine which our nation has covered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. All right. We should congratulate discussants with a very nice talk. Mine, two questions. One to Professor Yamura, which is follow-up to Dr. Besarasi's question. You discussed in the experimented model some sort of parallel arrangement in clinical trials where phase 1, 2, 3 are done concurrently. The way we thought about traditional way of doing them in series, the advanced phases, how the advantage of benefiting from failure trials in the form of safety and those. How is this taken into account when you're doing concurrent? How do you harness the benefits of failure information? How do you get it? So that's one. To Professor Manchi, I haven't heard much in the actual international arena the issue of vaccination of those who have had a disease already. Because I know the Secretary of Policy, I think even now the guideline is if a baby misses BCG, let's say the child is coming from an unvaccinated country, Tanzania, and they miss the window. You can say, okay, you have enough exposure and the community, there's no need of getting vaccinated. So I don't know whether to borrow from measles or even neuroscience, if the child was not vaccinated, no reason survived. What was the guideline there? Was that child partly vaccinated? I know the issues of
the duration of removing all this. Have discussion around that level where to make a clinical recommendation as to what should be the way for intended vaccinating individuals who are survived.
Thank you very much. Dr. Omari Mwangaza, who is online, can you ask your question, please?
Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah.
Yeah. Continue, please.
Yes, you get me.
Yeah.
Okay. Question about the presenter with the vaccine, about the COVID vaccines. Not I would like to understand affected people who are negative or who are only vaccinated. How long should he wait or she wait so that he can be vaccinated? And my other concern is the issue of myths and misconceptions which has been explained there in details, that the presence of myth and misconception is due to our weakness in field of science development. Should we accept the myth and the misconception so that we can stabilize our researches and prove to the society that they are really working? Is it not because of our weakness in the field of science? I think I'm going to get some explanation on that one. But again, there's another presenter who has presented through issue of traditional medicine. And we know that we have got the first waves. First wave in Tanzania passed by, and then we came into the second wave. But none among us who was vaccinated from the first to the second waves, and they are passed by. Now, now at this junction now, if at all we say to vaccinate, how are we going to differentiate whether the wave has been passed by or finished, or it's because of vaccination? How are we going to differentiate the two? You know, this is needy some sort of research. But we as scientific, what have we done in Tanzania as professors to prove to the society that at least we have got the evidence to prove that it's on the vaccine which will be working? But if at all are you getting me? I'm finishing now. If at all after being vaccinated, I'm not expecting to get out of my mask. How am I going now to convince the society about the vaccination and not putting on the mask? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I guess the questions have been received by the panelists. Yes, please.
There is one issue I have forgotten, please, about the tradition. One about the traditional medicine, issue of Nyungu. The presenter about who was presented about traditional has not explained in detail how steam inhalation help in the treatment or in the prevention of COVID-19. As we know, steam inhalation that just induces the release of interferons. We know we have got interferon alpha, interferon betas, and these interferons are the cornerstone of the fight against the virus. We know. How can now, I would like this in this lecture today, the presenter to prove to the society that interferons are induced by the heat inhalation. So we should practice our natural nyungus so that we can still prevent the issue of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have got your question. Thank you very much. I didn't want to comment on the presenters, but since there is time, I have a few issues. One, people who are online, they are complaining that my name is Francis, and I have a few comments to make. One is on through the reading literature, we find that Spanish influenza was more deadly than coronavirus. So I thought maybe
presenters, particularly Professor Yamoya, who is an expert in these diseases, maybe what are the comments? The Spanish influenza was more deadly than this coronavirus, but probably it was measures were taken to combat this. What are your views? The other thing is on the comorbidities, and that one is also connected to weather. We see that in areas like Kilimanjaro, Arusha, Mwanza, probably there, we seem to have more cases than the cases we have in Dar es Salaam, probably because of the humid and what. And what are the issues regarding to that? Because they also escalate myths and misconceptions in the society. But also, with regards to the traditional medicine, and, some people call them remedies, some people call them concoctions. Now, what actually happens? Because I'm not a medical scientist, I know that it's not very easy to kill a virus, is it? What happens is probably minimizing its multiplication and probably looking into prevent its multiplication. Now, what are the signs? What actually happens with your traditional remedy? Do you kind of minimize its multiplication, or your science is there to kill the virus? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We shall take that question, then this will be the last one.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Luka, and I would like to ask Professor Slagi, as far as the vaccination campaign is ongoing in different parts of Africa, and we had there were some issues regarding to the adverse reaction following immunization in some of the vaccines elsewhere in Western world, and this have also been part of the perpetuators of the anti-vaccination campaign. So, based on Professor Slage's experience so far, what are the adverse reactions following immunization which are prevalent in Africa with regard to different vaccines which are already which are being distributed in different parts of the continent? And so far, how have we prepared ourselves with regard to, with regard to ensuring that we have the pharmacovigilance system which is well in place to correct those adverse events following immunization, and also to clear the doubt within the public that with respect to the incidence that within, let's say, if 1 million people have been vaccinated, the incidence rate could be how much? So my issue here is the experience from the parts where they have already been vaccinating, especially in Africa. What is the issue with regard to the available vaccine, and how have they coped with the pharmacovigilance issues, especially in this limited setting?
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Again, my question goes to Professor Yamoya. Sorry, Prof. There is a concern among healthcare providers in this country that many are very much exposed to the COVID infection from the wave 1 and 2, to the extent that some believe that they are immune and probably they don't need vaccination at the moment. This is a belief among some of the healthcare providers that I'm talking to. recently. So probably we are targeting them, but some believe that they are immune because they are exposed. So the question to you is, what is the role of immune raised for those who were exposed with the previous strains? The second one, what is the role of those who acquired immunity after being infected? Do they mount natural immunity to protect themselves and they don't need the jab, or you still need even if you have infection before?
Thank you very much. Yes. May I now invite the panelists to respond? I guess you are writing down the question directly. Can we start with Dr. Amuya, who has the most of the questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, dear participants, for the interest in what we have been presenting. I will start with the last question and then go to the first one. The last question about exposure giving rise to immunity. And then for those who have already been exposed and developed immune response, do they need vaccination? Or are they protected adequately? Those questions, whose answers I do not know. And studies are ongoing to determine to what extent the COVID-19 virus gives rise to herd immunity. We have a lot of evidence of how herd immunity develops with the highly infectious diseases. We have not accumulated enough knowledge regarding herd immunity to COVID, to SARS coronavirus type 2 virus. We don't have, but we believe that is likely to be the case. So more studies are needed, but for the time being, I wouldn't say, no, don't get a vaccine, you are already protected. I would hesitate to give that recommendation. But yeah, I would promote studies of direction. Unfortunately, some proposals to that effect were written last year, but they were not supported by the atmosphere that was prevailing. But I think now they will resurface and people will address it. But that is a very good question and a very valid one. Now, regarding the issue of adverse events, I think I will request Karim to talk about this, because I think he also mentioned that in his presentation. Considerations in selecting the vaccines that are recommended in the guidelines. What would you, the question was, what were the considerations? I think these considerations are also written in the guidelines, and I think people should take an effort of reading them in order to be guided by what were used as criteria to select. But certainly efficacy was one of them, and then convenience of such vaccines. The vaccine that you require on the silver will be suited for our situation. There were issues about availability, shipping arrangements, and so on, and the possibility of rolling them without any problem. But suffice to say that the reasons, the criteria for making those choices are indicated. So it was not just something out of there was a question by Emmanuel Badambia regarding the challenges of overlapping clinical trials. And the concern was, one would not have the advantage of harnessing from the findings of the previous trial to inform the next one. Indeed, that is a problem with the overlapping approach. And I did mention one of the challenges of vaccine development is coming up with efficacy rates that may not actually represent it because of the small populations that one will be dealing with when the clinical trial phases are over. So it is quite valid, but people are perfecting the way of overlapping these phases without compromising very much on efficacy calculation. These are issues that require statistical studies, and I know they are ongoing, and people are perfecting these. There was a question regarding the Spanish influenza was much more serious maybe than the COVID, but it was tackled. And what are my views regarding that? And so, anyway, I'm not very sure that what we are doing now is, what we are doing now may be very much different from what was done during the Spanish flu influenza in those days. But I can assure you that people were also attempting to wash hands, people were attempting to social distance or physical distance rather, and we also maybe an element of masking, although I don't know to what extent that was done. Most of what I'm saying is that most of what we are doing now we are also dying during those times. But nowadays we have the advantage of institutional intervention, which is a vaccine. And I'm sure the other interventions that are being innovated will go a long way in enabling us to take care of the COVID-19 epidemic. So multiple approaches are essential, including the role of traditional or able, I don't know what to call it, traditional medicine or using alternative medicinal preparations or strategies or whatever. Those, to me, I don't need to be convinced, they have a role because they have been applied in many countries in the world and they appear to be working. And they have the major advantage of avoiding the side effects of chemicals that are used in conventional strategies. So I think taken together, all those strategies will go a long way in helping us address the current epidemic. I don't know if I missed any other question. No.
Thank you very much. Maybe you heard something to yourself.
Hello? Hello, can I say something?
So I had a question about the safety and the side effects or adverse events. And I alluded to a number of times. The adverse events are fever, malaise, headache, lightheadedness, muscle pain. These are the side effects, but they are at a lower scale and they don't cause it. And the other side effects could be due to the content which are used for preservation or as an adjuvant in that vaccine, which can cause some of the side effects such as anaphylaxis. And these are very rare. And Dr. Osati asked about Guillain-Barré syndrome. Guillain-Barré syndrome can be a manifestation of the disease. It has been reported a number of times. But they found that Guillain-Barré Guillain-Barré syndrome a side effect of the vaccine. And as you heard Professor Mishabari saying, yes, 79 of them or 29 or 59 or 60 or 12 or 15 were reported. But what was the denominator? Out of 2 million who were vaccinated? Out of 3 million who were vaccinated? So likewise, I would, not that I am in any debate with or part of medicine, but I would say that in the emergency medicine department, during that time, when people were exposing the whole vulnerable community of drinking a smoothie made from Tanzania, etc. Actually, my son who was working here at the emergency medicine got GI bleeding in patients who had taken that. Massive GI bleeding. So if he takes a picture of somebody having a massive GI bleeding and makes it viral, then all the benefits we are talking about of the traditional medicine become zero because now it's viral because it's bleeding. So you can take, this is the problem, or one of the major problems with COVID and the vaccines, is you can find all the bad things about vaccine, and she can find all the good things about the same vaccine. And depends on who is more vocal and who is more crowd, you can actually convince your people. That's the problem. The science has been kept in one side. So the side effects of the vaccine are no problem. Okay, then somebody to get rid of pain, tenderness, swelling. Then we have the side effects of the allergies. And then the vaccine itself causes fever, malaise, or shock. When I had the Sputnik vaccine, for 1 day, in the morning I had fever, I took 2 Panadols, and in the evening I again had fever, I took 2 Panadols. Next day I was at work, and I was fine. So that was 6th July. 7th July was Salasaba, and took my Panadols and had to take it home. And 8th July I was at work. So you have those side effects, they are here. Some people have a little more fever, a little more tired. But it's not long-lasting, and you are relatively safe. Then coming to the vaccine after suffering the disease. Research is still going on, as John said, but those who already suffered from the first wave and the second wave, they found that there is waning of antibodies. Antibodies disappear. There is no permanent antibodies remaining there. So it was relatively safe. It was rather safe to give them after 6 months or 9 months. In fact, even with vaccine, if they are not infected with vaccine, to get the vaccine. Now, the US is recommending a third dose despite having 2 doses. And of course, the choice of vaccine from our country point of view is number 1, the cold storage. Number 2, the cost. Number 3, the convenience of giving 1 dose. Without compromising the efficacy, the Johnson, Johnson is over 80% effective. So we are not compromising saying just bring the average here and we are happy to take it. No, it's a good one. It's comparable to the Sputnik drug. So people who have sat down to discuss those things are scientists. Some of them are here on this house. Likewise, when you talk about when we will go on wearing the mask, if 80% of people have herd immunity, either through getting infected or getting vaccinated, then we will not need a mask like what they did in the UK. On 19th July, no mask, except for few environments. Yes. But when you want herd immunity, means you have to have 80% infected. If the mortality is 2 out of 50, so for the whole herd here to be infected, so that we have herd immunity, 2 out of 50 have to also die. Are you agreeing with that? So we want to vaccinate them to create the immunity, rather than 2 out of 50 die. So we don't wait for herd immunity in such situations. And many herd immunities have happened because of vaccinations. Vaccinations actually stimulate herd immunity. just like you find in polio and Shigella and water virus and other. Vaccination itself causes. I think you know my question. Anything else which I have to answer?
Thank you very much for those responses. I'm wondering whether there are any unanswered questions that you are supposed to respond to.
Thanks. There is one question. Somebody was asking, in the first wave and second wave, the number of patients in Tanzania kept low. Could be it was contributed in one way or another by using these herbals. I cannot say anything about it. What I know is that within first wave and second, many used this. And these herbals were sold in Kariako. They were used countrywide. And we were receiving funds from people. One would say, if I'm going to the hospital, I'll be taken to the lockdown, and I don't want to go there. So advise me on the herbals that I can use. For sure, we were advising them to go to the hospital, but some did not want to go to the hospital. So they kept using these herbals. And some responded that, okay, they have recovered. But if they recovered because of those herbs, we are not sure. Because without science, you cannot speak anything, but they told us, so we don't know if that contributed to keep that number low in the second and the first and second wave. But what I know, even now, because of those initiatives, because we were talking on the media, in the radios, many people even now are using these herbal remedies. They are using tangawizi as a common tea in the evenings, in the mornings, they are using them. But the effectiveness with regards to this, you cannot say because we do not have that. The other thing is the issue of interference. If Nyong'o maybe promote this interference that contribute to immunity. For this also I cannot say anything because these interferons are glycoproteins that are produced as a response to attack by viruses or other agents that attacks our body. But when you take this or you undertake this steam inhalation, I do not see any connection with our body producing these glycoproteins because you have taken this hot steam. I don't see the connection. So if Nyong'o helps anything, is connected to what I've explained. That partly because you drink some tea with some concoctions of this, it could be improving your body immunity. It could be helping in clearing the airways that will later maybe facilitate or scale up your breathing or whatever you. And all this, if your body is feeling good, then the immunity could go up. But for sure, this is an area that needs further research. No one is competent enough to say anything to connect all this scientifically. We need to further research to see what steam inhalation and these herbal teas are doing. That's still a green area for this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tieno. Dr. Shabari, you have some questions.
Yeah, I think
there was a question about meeting misconceptions being witnessed with science. But before I answer that, may I also say that we're all talking about side effects.
and attempts have been made to say these are very minor. I can assure you, nobody is reporting how many people are taking ordinary medication and they end up with certificate. And there are people who eat maharage, they end up with certificates. So side effects, particularly the minor, that fair. We shouldn't put too much interest. The issue of myths and misconceptions have been a problem with science. I would like to say that, first of all, we cannot travel with myths and misconceptions. They are always there. The key thing is for us in the health sector, for those of us in the scientific community, to address that, particularly when we know the myths are dangerous. They are not useful to the communities. We should be addressed. And consequently, the myths sometimes they come as jokes in a bar and so on, and 2-3 people get them, and all of a sudden they enter the electronic media, and within a very short period, they are all over the world, if not in the country. And for that reason, we find that what I would really recommend is for those of us in the health system, those of us who know about COVID, not necessarily the details Professor Amanti and Professor Yamuya talking about. Those who know what this virus is and what it can do, and what is going wrong in the communities, presenting the communities the right direction. And we should even ignore who is the source. It could be a very good politician who's talking things which are not in line with the health sciences. We should say this is not correct. I'm not going to tell Professor Pasigabo this is not correct. I'm saying, if you are telling me to go and eat rice, and so doing and avoid getting COVID, I hear him say that, and immediately say this is not correct. And probably the areas where we have supposed to have people like one of the these religious leaders. Here, this is where we need assistance from the government. We should not allow religious leaders to come up with statements which put our people at peace. We should not allow that. And I think we will really recommend from everyone of us that the healthcare professions should be given the opportunity of being the people who are fine authority for issues in health, because are the people who are trained to do that in the society. The moment other people who are not health professionals pick these things, these will be misleading the public. And if they mislead the public, we're likely going to end up with health problems which are so difficult to solve. And that's the time they come to us. Can you please assist? And that will be problem. We should prevent this from happening by really making sure that the misconceptions or myths which have been spread are well addressed by people who have this knowledge and skills for doing this from their training. And this is the mandate of the healthcare professionals in the society. Our colleagues have their own mandate, and we will never interfere with them. So we should not interfere with what we need to do to make our society healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siraji. Are you still there?
Yes, thank you very much.
There was a question directed to you, which was about pharmacovigilance. How do you monitor the effects of vaccines and how do you do it? According to your experience.
How do we monitor the efficacy of the vaccine?
The side effects.
The side effect. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so far I want to inform the audience that at the moment the issue of adverse event or effect is not a big issue in the community, because many people are waiting to see what will happen to majority of those who are vaccinated. And to to a large extent, nothing happened. So there was only one belief which was consistent about AstraZeneca with a blood clot, and that was a myth which was busted. Yeah, so we have a register which is maintained by Pharmacovigilance Board. Okay, first of all, before we started the vaccination program, we had to seek for emergency use authorization from NMRC. This is Namibian Medical Regulatory Council. So there are specific forms that are designed to capture all the adverse events, including those which are mild ones, like sort of fever, something like that. So far, like most of the vaccination sites did not report an adverse event. There was one site in the whole country which reported one major or catastrophic event of a person who came walking for a vaccine and then died later the same day. Yeah, that case is still under investigation. The outcome is not yet concluded, so we cannot say that death was actually related to the vaccine. Okay, so with the Sinopharm, for instance, everything has been so far very smooth. Yeah, many people, we haven't registered, but there are some people who mentioned outside now the, the formal reporting routine, that they had some general body malaise a bit after use of AstraZeneca, and that's all. So if I could have been maybe asked earlier to make a presentation there, I would have made some more evidence to that regard. But it's not a big deal. There is no major adverse events that are being recorded. There was a question on how long shall someone wait after having COVID infection to be vaccinated. I think I missed the response on that, but here is what we are practicing. So far, we are changing the guidelines depending on the available evidence. So initially, we were vaccinating someone after COVID infection 3 months. You had to wait for 3 months before you can get your first shot. But with available evidence now, we have changed. One can wait only 14 days after the symptoms have resolved if they were symptomatic, or we can count 14 days after the day one was tested if they were asymptomatic, if they were positive and asymptomatic. So currently it's 14 days. You can go and get your vaccination. We were not vaccinating people above 60, but we are now vaccinating everyone from the age of 18. Why are we not vaccinating below 18 years? You see, we have gathered enough evidence in that particular age group. Those are school aging, going age, and we had several outbreaks in various schools, or institutions. But the children below the age of 18, they were only having mild symptoms, and mostly they were asymptomatic. So if you target that one, so far we didn't lose anyone in that age group because of COVID-19. There was one case of 14 years old who died, but that is someone who was having also other issues. So currently we are vaccinating only from the age of 18 and above. We are also vaccinating everyone above the age of 60. We are cautiously now vaccinating pregnant women, those who want it. Okay, so we have seen that some other countries, pregnant women are being vaccinated, and the outcome, there was some study where vaccinated women delivered babies with some level of antibodies already. So pregnant women are coming now up for vaccination also. And then, Dr. Ubugu, you mentioned about people who are saying, we think we have been exposed and we think we are already having immunity. This is a false belief. And I want to say at this moment that I also used to do the same, because after a year of fighting COVID-19 at the front line, sometimes you develop sore throat and what, and you think it's COVID-19. But this belief changed in February this year when I got admitted because of COVID-19. And I spent 5 days in ICU. And then I can say also something about the Nyungu practice. At the time, this was also a widely practiced practice among the people in the community. Yeah, but we came also to realize that it is not effective for everybody. I, for one, it wasn't helping. It was actually almost, causing catastrophic event on me. Although my counterpart had the same, was practicing this Nyungu, but she didn't have a severe form of the disease. But there are some evidence which are saying that the Nyungu practice or steam inhalation can assist, but during the time when the virus is probably still in the nasopharyngeal area. We have evidence that there are some variants that are not staying, they are not spending time in the pharyngeal area, they go straight to the lung. So in that case, the Nyungu would be effective. Yeah. So those are some of the experience. We have seen also, I don't have already compiled, I did not compile any statistical data to that effect, but we have seen people who have been infected once with a mild disease, and then we admitted them for the second reinfection. We had several people who were positive and went for isolation in November, December, and by May this year and June, we admitted a couple of them with a much more severe form of the disease. So first infection is not guarantee that you are going to have enough, antibodies to respond to the COVID. That's why I think vaccination addition is like a booster. Is acting like a booster for those who were infected before. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I guess now we have to come to the end of this session. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your resilience. And this is because the session was scheduled for only 2 hours. But I think today we're going almost there. No, we started late. So, please give a hand of applause to all the discussants. Please give a hand of applause to yourself. And therefore, I'd like to thank you very much for all the discussion, for all the presentations. I guess we are different people. The way we came in is different from the way we are going to walk out of this room, because we have made a lot of extra. So I'd like to thank you very much, and I declare this session. Thank you.
Hizi maiki zinabaki hapo. Asante. Salama tu. Hivi overflow ilija function? Hapana. Ulivunjwa leo akawa meza. Kupata technician mwingine. Yule alionyesha kushtaki. Alienda kushtaki. Kwa hiyo kama mwandikiwa na sheria